Look at these two identical diamonds. You won't see the difference with the unaided eye, yet your credit card will surely notice it. On the left, it's a 0.9 carat diamond that will cost you somewhere around $5,000. And on the right, you can see a 1 carat diamond with the price starting at $8,000. The difference is only about 0.02 grams, but the price changes a lot. And both of them are tiny, just around 6 millimeters in diameter. Yeah, a carat is not that much. It's a unit of mass that equals 200 milligrams. As for the biggest diamond ever found, it's 3,106 carats and weighs over 600 grams. An average orange weighs about 140 grams, so this diamond is like 4 oranges. It's called the Cullinan diamond, and it was found in South Africa in 1905. It got its name after the name of the mine it was found in. You can't see its full version these days as it was cut into several pieces. In total, it was divided into 9 larger stones and a whole bunch of smaller ones. In early 1905, the cutting of the Cullinan diamond was entrusted to diamond expert Joseph Asher, the head of the Asher Diamond Company in Amsterdam. A team consisting of 3 specialists dedicated 8 months to the task of transforming the large diamond into smaller gemstones, beginning their work in February that year. Initially, the monumental stone was divided into 7 pieces, which were further cut to create 9 large stones, each named Cullinan with a corresponding Roman numeral from 1 to 9. During the first attempt at cutting the Cullinan diamond, Joseph Asher broke the cleaving knife, which had taken 4 days to prepare, without causing any damage to the diamond. A new cleaving knife was then used for the second blow, resulting in the diamond being split into 2 pieces. The discovery of the largest gem-quality rough diamond sparked speculation and a sense of mystery, with some suggesting that the Cullinan diamond was merely a fragment of a much larger diamond. There were claims that 4 magnificent pieces had been broken off from a larger stone. Despite much discussion and speculation about the origin of the Cullinan diamond, no concrete evidence emerged to support these theories. But is the Cullinan diamond really the biggest diamond ever found? Well, the answer is yes and no at the same time. The thing is, until faceted, the diamond isn't as magnificent as you might think. So yes, it is indeed the biggest one, but nobody really could handle a 600-gram faceted diamond. Such a giant couldn't really adorn anything. The Golden Jubilee diamond, weighing around 545 carats, which is about 109 grams, is known as the largest cut and faceted diamond globally, surpassing the Cullinan diamond by 15.37 carats, or 3.07 grams. It was discovered in 1985 at the Premier Mine in South Africa, which is also the birthplace of many famous diamonds, like the original Cullinan. The Golden Jubilee diamond was originally referred to as the Unnamed Brown. The cutting and polishing of the diamond presented challenges due to its size, surface, deep cracks, and inclusions. De Beers utilized new cutting technologies for the project, which were later applied during the cutting of the Centenary diamond. After extensive work to reduce the diamond's weight, it was completed in 1990 in a fire rose cushion shape. The diamond was then brought to Thailand for exhibition and later purchased by Thai business people in 1995. It was given to King Bhumibol as a gift for his 50th anniversary on the throne and named the Golden Jubilee. The Golden Jubilee diamond is currently showcased in the Royal Museum at Phimmamak Golden Temple Throne Hall in Bangkok as part of the crown jewels. One day, nearly 18 years ago, a Filipino fisherman discovered a 2-foot-long pearl inside a giant clam in the waters near Palawan Island, the Philippines. He decided to keep it as a good luck charm, hiding it under his bed. Unfortunately, his home burned down, but miraculously, the 75-pound pearl survived. Officials in the Philippines have confirmed that the pearl measures 26 inches in length and 12 inches in width and is valued at $100 million. This incredible discovery surpasses the current record holder for the largest known pearl, the Pearl of Lao Tzu, which is valued at $35 million and weighs less than 15 pounds. The Pearl of Lao Tzu was also found off the coast of Palawan in 1934 and is currently displayed at Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum in New York. The Bahia Emerald is known for being one of the largest emeralds ever discovered, with the largest single shard found within it. It weighs approximately 752 pounds and originates from Bahia, Brazil. The gemstone narrowly avoided flooding during Hurricane Katrina in 2005 while being stored in a warehouse in New Orleans. An ownership dispute arose after the emerald was reported stolen in September 2008 from a secured vault in South El Monte in Los Angeles County, California. However, the emerald was eventually located and the case was brought to a settlement. Although the gemstone has been estimated to be worth around $400 million, its true value is still uncertain. A couple of years ago, a Sri Lankan gem company reported the discovery of what they claimed to be the world's largest single natural blue sapphire, weighing 683 pounds. Let's see what jewelry you could make from this behemoth stone. A blue sapphire with such a gigantic weight could be turned into 1,549,016 1-carat stones adorning engagement rings. The owners intended to auction off this gemstone after it had been officially valued. The Gemological Institute in Ratnapura, which initially owned the gem, declined an offer of more than $1 million from a potential Middle Eastern buyer. They estimated that the gem's real value was around $100 million. The discovery of the El Dorado rough topaz in 1984 in Minas Gerais, Brazil, was a significant event, with the rough stone weighing an impressive 81 pounds. However, after being cut and polished, the finished gemstone ended up weighing only 13.6 pounds, resulting in a loss of 83% of the original weight. This drastic reduction in weight was primarily due to the removal of non-gem quality material from the rough stone in order to create a high-quality product with an excellent cut, color, and clarity. The final product was a stunning faceted topaz with a perfect emerald cut, good clarity, and a desirable yellowish-brown color. Weighing 31,000 carats, the finished stone became the largest faceted topaz and gemstone in the world. The name El Dorado has since been used metaphorically to describe a place where wealth can be quickly attained. Additionally, it's been associated with El Dorado County in California and various other towns and cities across the United States. The term has also come to symbolize something highly sought after, though it may be elusive or never found. A ruby weighing 55.22 carats was recently sold at auction for a record-breaking $34.8 million, making it the largest and most expensive ruby to be sold this way. The gem was discovered in Mozambique and named Estrela de Fura, which means Star of Fura in Portuguese. Sotheby's, the auction house that handled the sale, described the ruby as extremely rare and significant in the world of gemstones. While diamonds typically dominate record gemstone sales, rubies are also highly prized for their rarity and value. The previous record for a ruby sold at auction was set by the Sunrise Ruby in 2015. It's a 25.59 carat stone from Myanmar that fetched $30.3 million. Estrela de Fura was originally a 101 carat rough stone, making it the largest gem-quality ruby ever found. It was carefully cut and polished to enhance its color and brilliance before being put up for auction.
They say this place is swarming with money. It's been stored there for centuries, but no one managed to take it away from this island. Treasure hunters have been bewitched with this place since 1795. Many people have tried their luck looking for the treasure that could be hidden there by the Spanish pirates or even by the Knights Templar. But today, it's impossible to get there, as it's a private place, so all you can do is book an ocean tour around this island. Otherwise, you can take a peek at it in a TV reality show starring the Legina brothers, Rick and Marty, who are a team of enthusiasts looking for the treasures of Oak Island in Nova Scotia, Canada. Yeah, seems like there's no place where TV producers can't get to. One of the most famous discoveries out there was the so-called Money Pit. Despite the promising name, it wasn't full of money. Now we have to jump to 200 years ago. The money pit was first found by a 16-year-old kid in 1795. One day, Daniel McGinnis went fishing at Oak Island. He saw a tree there. Unsurprisingly, it was an oak, and it had weird markings. They didn't seem to be natural, so Daniel decided to check the area. He then saw a sunken patch of ground and started digging immediately. His two friends helped him out, but instead of treasures, the guys only found logs placed underground at regular intervals. It looked like a place where someone could hide money or jewels, but nothing precious was found. However, there was something curious down that pit. Someone found a granite stone there, and it had an engraved inscription on it. There were many attempts to decode it, but most of them ended up in failure. There's one translation though, and it says, 40 feet below, 2 million pounds are buried. Yeah, McGinnis and his friends should have dug harder. The next fun thing about the money pit is the coconut fiber found down there. They say that large amounts of this fiber were found at a depth of 60 feet. It may not surprise you, but I have to remind you of one thing. Oak Island is in Nova Scotia, Canada. Coconut trees do not grow there. The nearest one is about 1,500 miles from Nova Scotia, which makes it obvious that someone brought this fiber purposefully. Researchers came up with an idea that coconut fiber could have been used to make ropes and lower all the treasures down the pit. Next up, we have not one, but two mysteries. In the late 1800s, the Oak Island Treasure Company was thoroughly inspecting and excavating the island. Everyone believed something enormous was hidden there. These guys managed to drill 153 feet underground. That's like 15 stop signs stacked one on top of the other. You might have guessed that they didn't find pounds of gold and diamonds, but they found a manuscript. There's a theory claiming that it's one of Shakespeare's lost manuscripts. Some scientists believe that it was hidden there by the writer and scientist Francis Bacon, the true author of Shakespeare's works. Yeah, rumor has it was Francis and not William who wrote all the plays and sonnets. But there's no proof it was really so. The money pit may be the most popular shaft on Oak Island, but it's not the only one, and it's not the first. Before the money pit discovery, treasure hunters were drilling at Smith's Cove. While damming there, they found a wooden piece. It was a U-shaped formation that had Roman numerals. After a more thorough inspection, the specialists realized it was supposedly dated to 1769. The money pit was discovered 26 years later. This fact created many speculations that this structure might have been part of the real shaft with treasures everyone was looking for. Now, look at this Templar coin. It wasn't the first discovery on the island, but it was crucial in some way. Even if it may not sound like a big deal today, in medieval times, those coins would amass an insane amount of wealth. They were typically stored in European fortresses. For the treasure hunters, this coin was a sure sign there was more to be found on the island. The logic is simple. If there's one coin of that kind, there must be something else. And they were right. It wasn't the only Templar discovery. On the southwest shore of the island, a crossbow bolt was found. Experts say it dates back to the 13th century. But, once again, that wasn't something the treasure hunters were after. Some more coins were found on the island. Rick and Marty Legina retrieved this precious piece from a swamp. The coin is made of copper, and this time, it originated from Spain. When it was found, the Legina brothers could only see the number 8 engraved on it. But later on, some experts studied this coin and claimed it was made sometime around the 17th century. They managed to clean it well and saw the date 1652 engraved on the back of this coin. There's a theory stating that Spanish explorers found some treasure but hid it instead of taking it to the king. So maybe this coin just dropped out of the chest full of coins and jewels and is part of the treasure everyone was after. Or someone could have accidentally lost it while looking for the treasure. Who knows? One more famous treasure hunter is Gary Drayton. Gary and his team, together with Rick Legina, came across 2 coins while metal detecting the island. Those were 17th century King Charles II Britannia coins. One of them had a very clear inscription on it, stating that the coin was minted back in 1771. Another swamp treasure of possibly Spanish origin is also here. This time, it's a silver ring. A specialist studied it closely and reported that it had been repaired twice. The ring was once made bigger, and it was also made smaller ones. It's decorated with a floral design, which was popular in Europe in the 1730s. Among all the other curious things, Rick and Marty Legina found a silver button at Isaac Point. The button's pretty old. It supposedly dates back to the middle of the 18th century, and the notorious money pit was discovered later. This is why it wasn't a big deal of a find. It could simply belong to some farmer peacefully raising livestock on the island. There's no official record of any chest full of gems and coins found on Oak Island, but enthusiasts did find some jewels there. First off, the team found a brooch with a magnificent red gem. They mistakenly thought it was a ruby, but a professional gemologist stated it was a garnet. The piece was made of silver, and it's pretty old. Experts believe it was made around the 15 or 1600s. Another brooch they found didn't have any gems on it, but it had an intricate design. It's a brooch with a leaf design and an ornate rope. There are 13 branches of the leaf, which instantly created more mystery to the whole treasure hunting. First off, there's a carving with a 13-branched tree on a rock on the north shore of this island. What's more, many people believe that the number 13 is important to the Knights Templar. The enthusiasts also found a brooch not far away from the place where Daniel McGinnis, the guy who found the money pit, lived. The brooch was shown to a professional gemologist, Charles Luton Brain. He had to break it to the team that there were no gems adorning this piece of jewelry. In fact, the stone that seemed to be a gem was just a piece of glass. It was processed using a special technique though, so it was leaded glass. The enthusiasts decided to study the brooch even more and found out that part of the brooch was made of gold. The specialists claim that the brooch dates back to the 14th century. Was it the treasure everyone was looking for? It all happened in 1708. On June 8th, the Spanish galleon San Jose was going back home to Spain from the Caribbean. In total, there were 17 ships. The captain of the San Jose knew they were in for some trouble, as English ships were lurking in that area. He knew they would be after the treasure loaded on the ships. The price of the treasure from the New World was so astronomical that it could turn the course of historic events in Europe upside down. In order to be safe, the Spanish galleon was to reach Cartagena de Indias. It's where we have Colombia now. But sadly, other things were predestined for the San Jose. The 4 English ships appeared. The galleon couldn't just escape them. There was no choice but to turn around and fight. Then all the chaos started. Red flags showing that the battle started. Firing cannons, the smell of gunpowder. Nobody knows exactly how it all ended. As dusk fell, it was hard to see clearly what was happening. The only thing that remained in history was the sinking flagship San Jose. Then, silence. No wonder that San Jose, being the flagship, was the most strategically important galleon. She would carry an insane amount of precious metals, such as gold and silver, pearls, and gems, such as emeralds. All of that went to stay on the bottom of the ocean for the next 3 centuries. But how come this lost treasure got so legendary? First off, the financial estimates made by scientists shocked people. The ship reportedly carried 7 million to 12 million pesos. Let's translate that to today's money. Yeah, it may not be the wealth that Elon Musk has, but it's around $10 billion. With that money, you could treat yourself to a couple of private jets, a whole car park of Lamborghinis, and a posh mansion. And you'd still have a lot of money left. You may think it all must have gotten rusty, just like the bits and pieces found in the Titanic. But when it comes to gold, things work differently. The Titanic didn't carry gold, or at least not that much of it. The jewels that were on the Titanic were personal belongings. And the cool thing about gold is that it never reacts with oxygen. It means that real gold won't rust or tarnish. So if your golden necklace got somewhat darker, It's a telltale sign it's not pure gold. It's an alloy, which is also cool, by the way, as you can easily clean it. Going back to San Jose's lost treasure, the golden coins there, even over 300 years later, were supposed to look the same way as the day they were minted. Now, going back to the place where the ship supposedly sank, remember I told you the captain wanted to go to the shore where Colombia is today? Well, on December 4th, 2015, the ship was indeed found in the waters of Colombia. As with many other important things today, the world learned about it from a tweet. It was sent by the Colombian then-president Juan Manuel Santos. People have been looking for the San Jose for decades, and once it was finally found, it only got more popular, and even more myths about it began to appear. One of the legends was told by Señor Santos himself. After the wreck had been found, there was a short radio interview. Thing is, the discovery was pretty unexpected. Many people spent a lot of time and effort looking for that wreck, and many of them even gave up hope of ever finding it. Juan Manuel Santos told a story about how the wreck had been discovered. There was an official event outside Colombia where he was accosted by a man. He looked like the famous writer Hemingway. He sported a white beard and had white hair. The only thing that Hemingway-looking man wanted was 2 minutes of Santos's time. The president conceded and listened to the man. What happened next was unbelievable. The man pulled out an antique map, more precisely, a carefully framed copy, and told the president that no one else knew about it. The man pointed to one exact spot. He said that it was the exact location of the treasure, and that that place didn't appear on any other map. He guaranteed that he knew where the treasure was. The story sounded crazy and swashbuckling. Whoever that man was, he turned out to be right. His identity remains a mystery for everyone, but somehow that man found the funding, determined the area to be inspected, and even made his way to meet the president. Right, the San Jose was stuffed with gold, and whoever found it would get filthy rich for the rest of their life. But let's face it, there's no way an ordinary person could ever discover such a treasure, as it requires too much effort and too much funding. But what if you're into treasure hunting and you want to go and find some treasure chests somewhere? Well, I guess I have a story about ordinary people looking and even eventually finding real treasure. Meet Forrest Fenn, an eccentric millionaire who hid a $1 to $5 million treasure. The exact worth was unidentified. You see, even Mr. Fenn himself said he never tried to appraise it. Inside the chest, there were 265 American gold eagles and double eagles, ancient coins, gold nuggets, you name it. Forrest stashed the chest in the Rocky Mountains and announced the treasure hunt back in 2010. Now let's focus on a map for a little bit and see how vast the Rocky Mountains are. Basically, the treasure hunters were supposed to sweep the two countries, both the USA and Canada. At first, it was a small treasure hunt with only a couple of people who knew about it. But sometime later, there was pretty much a competition, as tens of thousands of people set off to look for the treasure. There was research stating that over the decade, about 350,000 people tried their luck looking for the mystery chest. To announce the hunt, Forrest Fenn used a poem made up of 24 lines. The poem had some hints in it that most treasure hunters failed to decode. It was so well hidden that it took 10 years to finally discover it. There was also a blog called Thrill of the Chase, and on June 6, 2020, Mr. Fenn finally posted the long-awaited news. The treasure had been found. Forrest himself admitted that anyone who read the instructions from the poem carefully could find the treasure. The poem created a lot of buzz on the internet, with many users trying to decode the 9 hints the poem had. Some of them even suggested the possible keys to decode the puzzle. Those speculations might have helped the person who eventually found the treasure. At first, even Forrest Fenn himself didn't know who cracked all the codes in the poem, made it through the dense forest, and retrieved the chest. The lucky finder preferred to stay anonymous. and all we initially knew was that it was a man from the eastern United States. The winner sent a photograph to Forrest Fenn, and thus the treasure hunt was officially over. Sometime later, though, he revealed himself. It was Jack Stewart, a former journalist and medical student. The treasure was hidden under a canopy of stars in a forest in the Rocky Mountains. The vegetation there is lush, so the chest was hidden deep within. The chest had never been moved from the place where it was originally hidden. The exact location is still unknown, but we know that the treasure was hidden in Wyoming. Jack admitted that not all the advertised treasures were found in the chest. A small gold frog on a necklace and a Spanish emerald ring were missing. Forrest indeed found the frog in his collection and gave it to Stewart, but he failed to find the ring. The treasure hunt created by Forrest Fenn may seem extravagant, but he explained why he decided to start it. The only thing he claimed to have in mind was to give people some hope.
If you come across a well in Portugal, resist the temptation to gaze into its depths. The inverted tower in the enigmatic city of Sintra sends chills through those who encounter it as it spirals down a daunting 88 feet into the underground. It certainly wasn't designed to collect water, yet its true purpose remains a closely guarded secret. Dating back to around 1904, this well could have been involved in a mysterious initiation tradition from the Knights Templar. The Templars had faded into history almost 6 centuries before the construction of this pit, but their enigmatic traditions were revived by later generations. So one theory says that candidates seeking to join the group back then had to confront their deepest fears by facing this well, descending its spiral staircase blindfolded. When they reached the bottom of the inverted tower, they removed their blindfolds and were faced with this frightening sight. The only way out of this dark labyrinth was to keep looking up and following the light. Now imagine yourself browsing the shelves of a used bookstore until you find a book with an alphabet you've never seen before. You decide to use an image translation app but find no matches. Intrigued, you buy the book. Then you show it to your friends and family, but nobody recognizes that alphabet. Rare book dealer Winfried Vonnig probably experienced the same frustration back in 1912 when he acquired what would later become the most enigmatic book in the world. The work is known today as the Voynich manuscript, and it's written entirely in an unknown language that no one has deciphered yet. The pages of this 15th century codex are filled with botanical drawings, but these aren't typical daisies or roses. In fact, they don't resemble any plant species that we know of. What makes things even stranger is the illustrations of unfamiliar constellations and women swimming in green baths. Delving deeper into the realm of mysterious texts, we set off on a journey to the Qumran Caves near the Salt Sea in the Middle East. In 1952, a team of archaeologists stumbled upon 2 scrolls made of highly oxidized copper at the site. Unrolling them was a major challenge, so they decided to cut the scrolls into 23 parts to investigate them. Imagine their surprise to see Hebrew words like gold and silver popping up. But no, it wasn't an ancient invoice. It was more like a treasure map, pointing the way to over $1 million. Unfortunately, the treasure was never found. Not for lack of trying, though. You see, the quest isn't as easy as it may appear. Some of the copper scroll's vocabulary is technical, and some geographical locations remain a mystery. There's also one last possibility. Perhaps it's all a work of fiction, like a pirate tale from the old days. People talk about Mona Lisa's almost haunting stare that seems to follow you no matter where you stand. But here's a quick question. Does she have eyebrows? You got it right if you said no, and her complete lack of eyebrows adds another layer of mystique to her gaze. The most common explanation is that beauty standards were different, and perhaps plucking the hairs above the eyes was a thing around 1503. But take a look at other Italian paintings from that time, like La Schiavona or Portrait of a Young Girl. Yep, eyebrows. So, not everyone was entirely pleased with this theory, like French inventor Pascal Cotte. He spent 3,000 hours analyzing scans of the painting to dig through all the layers of Leonardo da Vinci's masterpiece. Now he claims that the Mona Lisa once had eyebrows, but they disappeared over time due to cleanings and restorations. Some historians, however, still question his findings, which means that Mona Lisa's style, or lack of it, remains an unsolved mystery. So, you decide to travel to Rio de Janeiro, and everyone tells you that Sugarloaf Mountain is a must-see. When you spot the mountain from a distance, you realize that the stone has a cavity. But around noon, the whole view changes. The shadow in that cavity takes the shape of a bird, an ibis to be precise. A local legend links this bird shape to the ancient Egyptian deity Thoth, as if the ancient Egyptians once visited Rio de Janeiro and were somehow inspired by the natural phenomenon. But it's probably just a big coincidence. I mean, literally. The real mystery, however, lies in the waters around Sugarloaf Mountain. In the 80s, archaeologist Robert Marks got a tip from locals about a treasure hidden beneath Guanabara Bay. He dove in and found quite a few Roman amphorae. You know, those ancient vases with two handles? His discovery could potentially provide evidence of a Roman shipwreck that might have reached Brazil 17 centuries before the Portuguese even set foot there. However, he couldn't proceed with his research, and to this day, the idea of the Roman presence on Brazil's coast remains uncertain. The true location of Cleopatra's tomb isn't the only ancient Egyptian mystery. Many secrets are carved into the walls of ancient structures, like in the Temple of Seti I. Take a close look at this hieroglyph, and you'll notice that it resembles a modern-day helicopter. Look to the right, and you'll see an engraving that looks like a submarine. Odd, right? The most reasonable explanation for this has to do with the legacies of different rulers. When a new pharaoh came to power, they had their own hieroglyphs added over the original ones. But this is still a topic of debate, as some Egyptologists believe that these mysterious hieroglyphs may represent some kind of ancient technology. The same applies to the Dendera light. The image found in the underground passageway of the Hathor Temple is a subject of significant controversy in Egyptian history. Some researchers suggest that the inscription simply represents a rising sun, while others interpret it as evidence of some kind of modern lighting system. And it does indeed resemble Crookes' tube, one of the early experiments with electrical discharges. Although there's no concrete evidence of ancient Egyptians having modern electricity, some historians believe that this theory could help explain why many discovered tombs don't have any residues left behind from the use of oil lamps or candles. A lot has been said about the mysterious pyramids of Egypt, but many people tend to forget that other inexplicable structures had already existed even before them. Our next stop takes us to Turkey, the top of a hill known as Göbekli Tepe, near the city of Urfa, holds an ancient secret. It features more than 20 circular stone enclosures dated back over 11,000 years. Many of these have heavily carved stone T-shaped pillars adorned with eerie human figures with folded hands. The most accepted theory is that it's the world's first temple, likely used for rituals or social events. But the greatest mystery lies in how it was built, as this site existed before the domestication of animals or the use of metal tools. So the construction must have been very difficult, challenging our understanding of the historical timeline. Now, I hope you're not afraid of heights, because we're about to take a flight over the Nazca lines. You've probably already heard about these massive mysterious drawings etched into an arid region of Peru. They come in many different shapes, like a spider, a monkey, and even a Google-eyed ET that is probably just a fissure. Anyway, this story got some fresh chapters in 2022 when an additional 168 new drawings were discovered. The original ones could only be seen from the air, but these new ones are much smaller and can be observed from the ground. However, One thing they have in common is that their purpose remains totally unclear. Some might call them the largest-scale calendar in the world. Others suggest that they served as a tool for agricultural purposes. Of course, many theories have emerged in an attempt to give the Nazca lines a meaning, but the truth is that they remain some of the most important unsolved mysteries in history. Unlike many other ancient Egyptian burial grounds, King Tutankhamun's tomb stayed hidden and free of unwanted thieves for 3,000 years. One reason was that the tomb was smaller than average and tucked away in a place called the Valley of the Kings. This area was already being extensively explored by the time they stumbled upon Tut's spot. The entrance was all covered in debris from building a nearby tomb, which must have also helped keep it a secret. There were also zero writings or signs on the outside of the tomb. Time passing also played a part in keeping it in amazing shape until the 1920s, when a man named Howard Carter finally made it in. But was Carter that big of a hero? Some recent findings say he might have been sneakier than initially thought. People used to think Carter wasn't just a glorified treasure hunter, he was a true archaeologist. Before Tut, he had been on a relentless quest for Egyptian artifacts. He discovered his interest in these unusual objects when he was a child, and soon started drawing the sculptures and inscriptions that were found in ancient tombs. After stumbling upon the remains of King Tut, Carter spent a decade recording and processing all sorts of objects, like golden thrones, chariots, and statues from Tut's tomb, shipping them down the Nile to Egypt's museum in Cairo. Well, at least that was the official story. More recent discoveries claim that not all of the objects made it to Egyptian officials. A secret letter seems to uncover Carter's little 10 for them, 1 for me policy. The letter in question was sent to Sir Alan Gardiner, a philologist and friend of Carter's, dated from 1922. In these writings, Carter mentioned having found the tomb and was asking his buddy for some advice. In another letter from 1934, Gardiner seems to be thanking Carter for an amulet, which was sent to him as a thank you gift. Carter was adamant that it didn't come from Tut's tomb, but evidently it did. Even the British director of the Egyptian Museum was onto Carter's sneaky endeavors, but couldn't prove it. He compared Gardiner's amulet to others from Tut's tomb, and lo and behold, they were a perfect match. Gardiner was so disappointed to have been put in such a sticky situation that he vented to Carter in another letter. Deciding to be a good friend, Gardiner didn't throw the famous archaeologist under the bus. Instead, he advised Carter to take those stolen goods back to Cairo, just like he'd advise you to like this video and subscribe to the Brightside channel for more amazing videos on the most unique topics in history. It's not the only shady piece of information on Carter's post-discovery behavior. In 1947, a man named Alfred Lucas, who used to work with a controversial archaeologist, gave some information in an obscure journal in Cairo. He claimed that Carter sneakily cracked open the burial chamber door himself. Then he sealed it back up like nothing had happened before the official uncovering. Now, why would he do that? Well, the same theory suggests that Carter and his crew might have entered the tomb early so they could get their hands on some ancient goodies. Obviously, these people couldn't risk having such objects sold while they were still alive, but made sure they were auctioned off after they passed. Carter, though, never confessed to anything. He made no official denial either, but the Egyptian government couldn't risk any more mysterious disappearances, so they prohibited him from entering the tomb for a while. Some have connected this apparent stealing to the curse of King Tut. If you've never heard of it, know that it became quite the scary tale soon after King Tutankhamun's resting place was uncovered. It claimed that anyone messing with the tomb of the boy pharaoh would face some serious bad luck. It's not all dramatic like a mummy going on an aggressive spree, but word got out that the people involved in disturbing King Tut's lair met some mysterious, untimely ends. The main untimely passing related to this supposed curse is that of George Herbert, the 5th Earl of Carnarvon. He was this British aristocrat who helped fund the search for the tomb. He passed away just a year after the tomb was opened. Now, people love to call it mysterious, but it turns out that Herbert was already in pretty bad shape health-wise when he got to Cairo, and he ended up getting taken down by a regular disease. Now, let's talk numbers. There were a lot of people linked to this tomb opening: security guards, archaeologists, and supporting staff. And sure, a few of them did pass not long after the tomb started receiving visitors. As much as we'd like this curse to be true for the sake of, good storytelling, statistically, if you have a bunch of people connected to opening a tomb, you'd expect some passings just by random chance. The average lifespan for those supposedly targeted by the ancient curse was more than 20 years after the spell was supposed to kick in. Herbert's daughter even lived until the 1980s, that's half a century later. And Howard Carter himself lived until 1935, a solid 16 years after the big reveal. Some have suggested that the whole curse was nothing more than a careful PR strategy. You see, when Tut's tomb was found, Howard Carter wanted to make a priority out of keeping nosy reporters away. So he might have come up with a curse hanging over anyone entering the boy king's resting place. But what was stolen from King Tut's tomb anyway? Well, some jewelry to begin with. It might have been snatched by Howard Carter himself, according to a French specialist. He did some intensive research by looking at old pictures taken from inside the tomb back in the 1920s. He compared those images to various objects from museums and auction houses. He soon started to piece together the whereabouts of some of Tut's jewelry. First up, there's this collar that used to be on Tut's chest. It was all broken into pieces, and some parts went via Carter to the Nelson Atkins Museum in Missouri. Meanwhile, other bits ended up on a necklace owned by some unnamed people who tried to sell it in 2015 but failed. Even the Nelson Atkins Museum agrees, as they've confirmed the information on their website. Then there's a headdress piece. Some beads from it that once belonged to Tut apparently got stolen by Carter too. They were also strung into a necklace and are now being held at the St. Louis Art Museum. Another fancy collar made out of glazed ceramic magic spent some time at the Met, far away in New York. Thankfully, it was sent back to Egypt a bit over a decade ago. This seems to have been, as you'd expect by now, also stolen by Carter. Missing artifacts aside, King Tut still gave a ton of amazing objects that helped us learn more about this incredible ancient culture. Starting with the famous burial mask. It's this massive 21-inch gold art piece with semi-precious stones and glass paste. It weighs 22 pounds and showcases the boy pharaoh with a long beard and a headdress with a cobra and vulture. On the back, there's this spell from an important ancient Egyptian spiritual book that's supposed to make sure it works just as well in the afterlife. Tut was also apparently a board game enthusiast. They found 4 board games in his tomb, some made of ivory. Archaeologists also found a pair of gold sandals, though you'd imagine they were more for show than for comfort. In fact, the pharaoh probably never wore them in his lifetime. Now, speaking of fashion items, it turns out Tut was quite the fancy ruler. They even found a mannequin in his tomb that was used to pick out, adjust, and store his outfits and jewelry. The boy king seemed to have also enjoyed some music, based on the 2 trumpets historians found in his tomb. Though they were played back in 1935 in a BBC broadcast, the instruments are today considered too fragile to be maneuvered.
Guess what? A treasure that was thought to be lost forever has been found. Back in April 2015, Deep Ocean Search, a team of treasure hunters, recovered 50 million pounds worth of silver rupee coins from the British steamship. The ship sank in the 40s during its journey from India to England. The wreck was found at a whopping depth of almost 17,000 feet, setting a world record for the deepest recovery ever. To put that into perspective, the famous Titanic wreck is only found at a depth of 12,500 feet. But don't be duped. This was no easy feat. The team faced multiple breakdowns of their systems due to the pressure, temperature, and repeated dives at such a depth. Did you hear about the epic treasure found on the Black Swan wreck? It was discovered by Odyssey Marine Exploration in 2007 off Gibraltar, and they hit the jackpot. The salvage team found a whopping 17 tons of coins worth $500 million. Can you even imagine that much money? It's said to be the biggest haul ever found in the treasure hunting world. But the crew didn't spill the beans on where they found it or what kind of coins they uncovered. They just hightailed it back to the US with their loot. Sneaky. An old man in the Dominican Republic was selling a coin that ended up being the oldest coin ever minted in the New World. And that's just the start of the craziest shipwreck story ever. The team at Deep Blue Marine used some fancy sonar to search the area where the coin was found, and they stumbled upon parts of a wrecked ship. They also found jade statues, ancient Mayan bling, and gold coins from way back in 1535. Like, one set of 4 coins alone is worth a cool $1 million. The crew got to keep half of their booty while the Dominican Republic authorities snagged the rest. It's believed the ship sank during a gnarly hurricane just a few years after Columbus discovered the New World. No other shipwreck has ever turned up such ancient artifacts. We all heard about the Titanic, the OG shipwreck, known for its epic tragedy when it hit an iceberg in 1912. But what's even crazier is that $300 million worth of diamonds went down with it. Like, can you imagine? American and French researchers who found the ship auctioned off nearly 6,000 items recovered from the wreck. We're talking diamond bracelets, fancy dishes, and even a postcard a passenger wrote to their parents. Treasures from the Titanic are still popping up for auction. Like, some deck chairs from the first-class promenade deck were auctioned off for £85,000. They're too delicate to sit on now, but still a crazy piece of history. The Schmidts, a family of treasure hunters, just stumbled upon over $1 million worth of gold artifacts in shallow waters only 30 miles north of West Palm Beach. And get this, one of the coins was even meant for the King of Spain. These treasures were part of the 1715 treasure fleet that sank 300 years ago due to a massive hurricane after leaving Havana, Cuba. Can you believe it was only 15 feet deep in the water? They found 51 gold coins and 40 feet of ornate gold chain. Talk about hitting the jackpot. Brent Brisbane, the owner of 1715 Fleet Queen's Jewels, LLC, said those finds were important not just for their monetary value, but their historical importance. But there's more. The ship was recovered over 50 years ago, and divers have only found about $50 million worth of treasure. It's believed that there's still over $400 million worth of treasure hiding below the sea. The ultimate party of exploration just got a little more exciting. We're talking about Vasco da Gama's Esmeralda, the oldest shipwreck from Europe's age of exploration, baby. This bad boy was wrecked in a gnarly storm back in 1503 along the India route from Europe in the Arabian Sea. But wait, it gets better. The wreck was actually found way back in 1998, but it took almost 2 decades to excavate it. And guess what? They found rare coins, a ship bell, and other cool artifacts that confirm the identity of the ship. And the treasures are still being uncovered. Just last year, in 2017, they discovered a unique navigational tool called an astrolabe at the wreck. How cool is that? A bunch of Indonesian fishermen found a super old ship from the 9th century off Belitung Island in 1998. It proved that trading between China and the Middle East was totally a thing back then thanks to the maritime Silk Route. The wreck is so cool that it's also known as the Tang treasure because it's the biggest collection of Chinese Tang dynasty artifacts ever found in one spot. But there's some serious drama going down over an exhibition of these priceless treasures. It's like a battle between commercial treasure salvage and archaeological preservation of shipwrecks. Who will win? Only time will tell. Meet the holy grail of shipwrecks. It's the Spanish galleon San Jose, and it was loaded with silver, gold, and emeralds worth billions of dollars today. But get this, it sunk after a battle with British ships off the coast of Cartagena, Colombia, way back in 1708. Crazy, right? But here's the kicker. 300 years later, in 2015, some awesome peeps discovered the wreck on the ocean floor. The Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution used a cool underwater vehicle to identify the ship by its distinctive cannons, and they're still recovering treasure as we speak. So, if you're feeling lucky, keep your eyes peeled for other hidden treasures that haven't been found yet. The ultimate jackpot, the sunken motherlode of the Nuestra Señora de Atocha, was discovered off the coast of Key West, Florida, in July 1985. Mel Fisher, the legendary treasure hunter, spent a whopping 16 years searching for it. The Atocha was on a mission to bring back loads of riches to Spain from Havana, Cuba back in 1622, but got caught up in a gnarly hurricane. To celebrate the 30th anniversary of the discovery, there was a sick auction where people could buy pieces of the Atocha's treasure, like gold and emeralds. If you're keen to see more of this epic haul, head to the Mel Fisher Maritime Museum in Key West. The whole shebang is worth around $450 million, no biggie. Hey, have you ever dreamt of finding buried treasure and becoming a millionaire overnight? Well, guess what? It's not just a dream. Meet Forrest Fenn, the man who hid a chest filled with $1 to $5 million worth of treasure in the Rocky Mountains. And get this, it took 10 years for someone to finally find it. Fenn announced the treasure hunt back in 2010, and over the years, tens of thousands of people set off to look for it. The treasure chest was filled with 265 American gold eagles and double eagles, ancient coins, gold nuggets, and more. But finding it wasn't easy. Fenn used a poem with 24 lines that had hints in it, and it took some serious decoding skills to figure out where the treasure was hidden. Finally, in June 2020, the long-awaited news came. The treasure had been found. The lucky winner was Jack Stueff, a former journalist and medical student. The treasure was hidden under a canopy of stars in the forest in the Rocky Mountains, and it was so well hidden that not all the advertised treasures were found in the chest. But don't let that stop you from trying your luck at finding buried treasure. Who knows? Maybe you'll be the next lucky winner. And if you need some inspiration, just remember that Forrest Fenn's only goal was to give people some hope. So why not give it a shot and see what you can find? Who knows, maybe you'll become a millionaire too.
So, if you still haven't made your fortune, don't be too sad. There are huge amounts of money out there longing to be discovered. Look at this humble Chinese villager. At 51 years old, he accidentally made 4 million won, which is over $600,000, without doing anything special. The thing is, he and his son just found it in a pig while doing their basic chores they would do every single day. The stone they found inside the pig is called bezoar, and I bet you've never heard of it before. It's not common in the West, but it's a big deal in traditional Chinese medicine. If you look at this stone, you may think it's ew. This 4-inch long, 2.7-inch wide treasure is hairy and looks a bit gross at first glance, and it doesn't get better. After discovering the stone, the father and the son took it to Shanghai for an appraisal, and it cost them around $6,000. But still, the initial expenses don't seem so big, considering they're a mere 1% of what that stone is worth. Now, not everything in an animal's belly is going to make you rich. Only the gallbladder stuff is real gold. I know that women can buy themselves flowers and write their names in the sand, but let's face it, women just love it when we offer them fancy bouquets. Still, today, it's much easier to do than it was in the 17th century. Back then, an average Joe would have to slave his way to afford just one flower. Somewhere around the 1630s, there was a tulip mania, where tulip bulbs cost more than gold. Okay, the price wasn't real. It was a speculative bubble way before all the other economic drama we see today. We just haven't learned our lesson yet. Back at that time, a single tulip bulb was sold for more than what a skilled artisan made in an entire year. And it wasn't just any tulip bulb. We're talking about bulbs with fancy colors and patterns that were rare and sought after. The tulip market was like the stock market at the time, with traders making deals in taverns and signing contracts with each other. It was all about supply and demand. And just like with any bubble, prices eventually crashed in February 1637, leaving everyone with empty pockets, scratching their heads, and feeling ill. Meanwhile, speaking of feeling under the weather, back in 15th century Europe, people turned to Egyptian mummies for relief from headaches, stomach issues, and even more serious conditions modern medicine still can't beat today. Embalmed bodies were thought to have some magical healing powers. But why did folks eat mummies in the first place? Well, it all started with a mix-up in translations. There was a substance called mumia that was considered super valuable for its healing properties. But when Western Europeans got wind of it through letters from other nations, they mistakenly thought it came from Egyptian mummies. This led to a whole fashion of medical mummy eating. People believed that consuming parts of mummies could cure all sorts of ailments. So they started raiding Egyptian tombs and selling mummies like hotcakes. Demand was so high that some shady characters even started making fake mummies out of… Trust me, you don't want to know it. I'll leave it to your imagination. But you can write your ideas in the comments. Fast forward to the Victorian era, and the enthusiasm with mummies was at an all-time high. Egyptomania was in full swing, with mummy unwrapping parties becoming a popular pastime. It wasn't until the late 19th century that the use of mumia finally fizzled out. One day, a dead sperm whale washed up on a beach in La Palma, Spain, and a professor was sent on a mission to crack the case of the animal's demise. Amidst crashing waves and the massive carcass, he stumbled upon a surprising revelation: a hefty 21-pound stone stuck at its intestines. But this was no ordinary rock. Valued at 500,000 euros, which is over $545,000, it turned out to be ambergris, also known as floating gold. Legend has it that this funky substance can be found floating in the sea or rarely washed up on beaches. It was discovered in the 1800s. It's actually formed from the indigestible bits sperm whales gobble up while feasting on squid, like their beaks. Over time, perhaps years, these bits clump together in their intestines, almost like a kidney stone, to create this valuable lump of ambergris. Now, you may ask yourself why a sperm whale's excretion costs way more than your house. But the answer is simple. It just smells good. Okay, it's not good. It smells divine. The aroma ranges from sweet to musky tones, and perfume makers go bananas for this stuff as it helps fragrances last longer. The more a substance called amberin it contains, the pricier it gets. And the color matters too. Black means less amberin, while white packs a punch. Cheaper options opt for synthetic alternatives, but top-notch perfumes go for the real deal. While using ambergris in perfumes is a no-go in the US, the French still adore this magical ingredient. By the way, over $500,000 is not a limit here. Some lucky fishers once scored a chunk of ambergris worth $1.5 million in the Gulf of Aden. Those sperm whales sure have some fancy intestines, huh? Now, next time you go grocery shopping, do not complain about prices, okay? At least you can easily afford any spice out there. Your many times great-grandfather somewhere in the Middle Ages wouldn't believe you that cinnamon and black pepper can be that affordable. Spices were worth their weight in gold and gems, driving the economy like nobody's business. Back in the day, food went bad faster than milk in the sun, so spices were a hot commodity to cover up that not-so-fresh flavor. European nations wanted to control the spice trade, which led to crazy expeditions to India and other Asian lands. The Portuguese, Dutch, French, Spanish, and English were all fighting for spice domination, setting up shop and making a mint along the way. Now, on to the exact prices. Back in 1393, saffron was as pricey as a horse, ginger as much as a sheep, and mace as costly as a cow. And a pound of nutmeg was worth 7 fat oxen in medieval Germany. That black pepper that we take for granted today wasn't just for seasoning. Peppercorns were actually used as currency in Europe. Towns kept their books in pepper. Brides got pepper as part of their dowry, and some landlords even accepted peppercorn rent. May I cover my utility bills this month with this fancy packet of cinnamon, sir? No? What? You think I should go out and get an actual job? Okay. Hey, that's a nice t-shirt, but does it come in purple? What? It'll cost 10 times more in this color? Now, this one may sound insane to modern people spoiled by the variety we've got today, but if the shopping malls we know today existed many centuries ago, that would be a common thing. Making Tyrian purple dye was such a chore that it cost a pretty penny. It's rumored that purple dye was as valuable as silver. This led to purple fabrics becoming symbols of status, with fancy laws dictating who could wear them. Big-shot Roman leaders flaunted their importance by wearing white togas trimmed in Tyrian purple, while victorious generals rocked the grandest toga of them all, solid purple with shiny gold embellishments. Fast forward to the 4th century, and it was basically illegal for anyone in Rome to sport Tyrian purple except for the emperor. That's how exclusive it was. In fact, saying someone donned the purple came to mean they became emperor. The Byzantine Empire took tight control over Tyrian purple production, using it solely for their fancy silk fabrics. Fun fact, if a royal kid was born, they were literally born in the purple. But I digress. Tyrian purple may have been worn by the nobility, but the origins of this fancy dye are far from being noble. It came from the slimy stuff of 3 different sea snails. Each snail made a unique hue. One of them gave us a bluish purple, another one rocked a reddish purple, and there was even a snail that could help make a vibrant red dye. Do you remember 2011? Well, play along with me. A diver is set to go deep into the waters of the Musi River, located in the heart of an Indonesian island. He is one among many who have been getting unbelievable artifacts from the bottom of the river. Little by little, divers and fishers discover a long-lost Sumatran civilization. Known as the Island of Gold, the kingdom of Srivijaya was most likely the closest to a real-life El Dorado there has ever been. However, it disappeared late in the 13th century, and until recently, researchers didn't even know the exact location of the kingdom. Picture a civilization built on a river, a true water world, according to the archaeologists that have been studying Srivijaya. Houses, markets, and places of worship were built on wooden piles above the level of the water. Citizens moved around like modern-day Venetians in simple boats. Srivijaya was known to be a rich and important kingdom. It existed from the 7th to the 11th century CE. It was part of the Silk Road, and anyone traveling from east to west had to pass through the city. Their kings were smart and gained control of the Malacca Strait, which allowed the town to have total control over trading routes in the region. If anything, they sure were honoring the town's name. Srivijaya translates from Sanskrit into prosperous victor, or simply glorious. The kingdom was an important commercial outpost of ancient times. It was strategically located among the most influential commercial routes of the ancient world, which means its citizens became extremely rich. Ancient wealthy societies used to overly display their gold and precious metals. They would often use these metals as offerings to their deities, or they would use them to forge large statues and to make jewelry for kings and queens and decorations for their palaces. Srivijaya wasn't different. Local Indonesian divers who have been exploring the half-mile of the Musi River near the city of Palembang have found some evidence. So far, they've discovered a life-size statue of Buddha, jewelry studded with precious gems, temple bells, mirrors, golden jugs, and other items. No official archaeological excavations have been done in the area, so these artifacts are the first items of the Srivijayan Empire ever found. Sean Kinslett, a British maritime archaeologist who has reported on these discoveries, says he is truly surprised. For long, people have been speculating about the true wealth of Srivijaya, and it seems that the rumors have been confirmed. We're starting from ground zero, he says. We don't know what clothes the people of Srivijaya wore, what their tastes were, what kinds of ceramics they like to eat off. Even though this discovery has brought excitement to the scientific community, there is a downside. Divers and fishers sell the retrieved artifacts at the International Antiquities Market before archaeologists can take a look at them. Researchers could try to buy some items, but they're sold for millions of dollars worldwide. Most of the information we know about this El Dorado of the East was learned from merchant accounts of the city. These descriptions say Srivijaya was a kingdom of human-eating snakes and multilingual parrots. That's weird. Some say its active volcanoes gave the town an eerie and enigmatic sight, and all stories emphasize the amount of gold available there. Travel reports were a common way to describe cities in ancient times. In case you didn't know, this is how the legend of El Dorado originally began. As European explorers began their excavations in South American lands back in the 1500s, the word got out that an Amazonian civilization used to paint their leader in gold as an offering to higher powers. The legend of El Hombre Dorado, also known as the Golden Man, began to quickly spread around Europe. It turned out that it was only a ceremonial piece of pre-Columbian civilization. It had nothing to do with the land of infinite gold. Now, no one knows what brought about the decline of the Srivijaya Empire. Some speculate that its active volcanoes could have swallowed it, or maybe wooden houses built above the river eventually sank. Maybe if divers keep retrieving lost items from the bottom of the river, archaeologists will be able to figure out what happened to the city. It seems to be quite common in the history of the world. Some ancient civilizations disappeared without a trace, as happened with the Mayan civilization, for example. The Mayans managed to build one of the biggest empires in pre-Columbian America. It was believed to be home to over 2 million people, and it thrived for over 6 centuries. Its sudden demise is something that bothers archaeologists and scientists alike. The Mayans began to settle in South America as early as 1500 BCE. Their civilization spanned Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, Guatemala, and Belize. They are believed to have built around 40 cities at the height of their empire. They also developed a complex hieroglyph system that has been studied since it was discovered by modern scientists. The Mayans were keen engineers, astronomers, and farmers. They were post-nomadic people that settled in vast areas of farmland where they could grow corn and other types of vegetables. Archaeologists are still learning a lot about the Mayan civilization by examining their ruins. The city of Chichen Itza, located in the Yucatan Peninsula, is one of the most important Mayan sites unearthed today. The site is made up of a total of 26 ruins, and it is home to a world-famous pyramid known as El Castillo. It consists of a series of square terraces with stairways on each of the 4 sides of the temple. It was built as an homage to a feathered serpent deity. The Mayans were such architectural geniuses that they managed to build a pyramid that cast a particular shadow. More specifically, in the late afternoon during the spring and fall equinoxes, the pyramid casts several triangular shadows that create the illusion of a feathered serpent crawling down the pyramid. And they created this with none of the tech we have today. The city is so amazing that since 2007, it has been considered one of the 7 wonders of the New World. The Mayan Empire thrived for over 6 centuries due to their wise resource management system and astronomical knowledge. They were able to accurately predict eclipses, and using their rudimentary technology, could even locate Venus and Mars. They had everything to thrive for much longer than they actually did. This is why the Mayans' fall intrigues modern scientists so much. No one has been able to understand completely what led to their demise. That is, until a recent discovery. A study done by NASA claims it can explain what might have happened. Scientists have uncovered a sample of pollen trapped for over 1,200 years in ancient layers of lake sediment, which dates back to the time just before the collapse of the civilization. The analysis has revealed something completely new about the Mayans. Instead of the suspected claims that the Mayans disappeared due to terrible disease or some extended conflict in the region, it could have happened due to deforestation. Perhaps to build their entire empire, they had to cut a lot of trees. Without trees, their soil could have eroded, and all their fertile lands could have slowly and gradually become barren. According to NASA scientists, the temperatures in the region could have risen by about 6 degrees, and from that point on, the land would have become even drier and crops more difficult to grow. Basically, NASA says that the Mayans couldn't do the sole thing that made them thrive, which was agriculture, and their kingdom began to decline. Oh yeah, and this theory was supported by yet another find. Archaeologists found skeletons from the time of the empire. Those had prominent signs of malnutrition. This theory might really shed new light on Mayan history. It could explain what brought down such a powerful civilization. So, what do you say? Which theory is true? Have we actually managed to find out the reason for the fall of the Mayan Empire? A remote survey vehicle, Okinos Explorer, found this mysterious golden orb in the Gulf of Alaska, about 2 miles deep underwater. No one can say what this thing is. It's a strange object just 4 inches wide, and it was firmly stuck to some rock. When you touch it, it's smooth, soft, feels like flesh. You can even see a hole in it, as if something escaped from there. But what? Divers brought the mysterious orb to the lab from the Pacific Ocean. They felt like in the beginning of a horror movie, almost as if you poked this thing, something would jump at you. This could happen if they had found it sooner. The hole in that orb means something alive tried to get inside or break out from inside, which is why scientists assume that this is an egg. We might have discovered a new species, or a new life stage of some species we already know. Some species do lay their eggs on the ocean floor, like squids. Although, if that's the case, then these animals might be gigantic, because that egg is huge. But maybe it's not an egg. Maybe it's a sponge. They found this thing surrounded by white coral, where sponges usually vibe. Just months before this discovery, scientists found more than 5,000 new marine species in a tiny space between Hawaii and Mexico. The Gulf of Alaska is home to 52 more species, with tons yet to be identified. So, maybe it's just one of those sponges we haven't discovered yet. Or it might be a coral, or something entirely different. The only thing scientists know for sure is that the thing is a living organism. They're planning to move the orb to a more advanced lab to conduct DNA testing and reveal more about it. And it's not our first horrifying discovery from the oceans. In 2013, 2 rare locomotives were discovered under 90 feet of water off the coast of New Jersey. Scientists think that both of them were lost in the 1850s. For something that's been underwater for 160 years, they're in very good shape, even with layers of rust and barnacles. You can even see their smokestacks, and they sit upright, as if ready to pull into a station any minute now. They're not sure where these locomotives came from. There's no historical record of them being built or lost, which makes their discovery even more mysterious. They have strangely rare steam engines, both about 15 tons, lying 5 miles off Long Branch. The engine models were already outdated even back when these trains were made. They were small and powerful, but were only produced for a short time. Perhaps they were on a journey from Boston to the mid-Atlantic. Then a storm struck. It caused them to either fall off a barge or to be deliberately pushed off to save the ship. Scientists want to restore the locomotive to learn more about them. And this isn't the only gift to the seas humans left behind. Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon, has found the Apollo 11 F-1 rocket engines in the ocean. During the 1969 Apollo 11 mission, the Saturn V rocket used 5 powerful F-1 engines in its first stage. Each of them produced 1.5 million pounds of thrust. They burned 6,000 pounds of fuel per second, 1.5 million times that of a regular car. These engines burned for a few minutes before falling back into the Atlantic Ocean. Jeff Bezos got inspired by this story and began the search for those engines about a year ago. The team used an advanced deep-sea sonar. They finally found the engines 14,000 feet below the ocean surface. Scientists aren't sure what the conditions of the engines will be. They did have a super-fast impact with the ocean after all, and then laying over 40 years in salt water. But they were built from very tough materials, so hopefully we'll be able to study them. Ideally, Bezos wants to recover them. They're still a NASA property, but he hopes to display them in museums like the Smithsonian or the Museum of Flight in Seattle. Can you imagine finding the famous yellow brick road from The Wizard of Oz at the bottom of the ocean? This thing looks like a man-made road, but believe it or not, it's a natural volcanic structure. Divers were exploring underwater volcanic mountains called seamounts in Hawaii. They wanted to investigate a split in the Seamount Trail. They live-streamed their journey and suddenly stumbled upon something fascinating, a pattern of cracks in the seabed that looks like a brick road. They used a robotic arm to pick up the rocks. The rocks had distinct rectangular blocks separated by straight lines and right angles. Someone joked that it might be a road to Atlantis, and another called it a yellow brick road, hence the name. But after some study, scientists discovered that this dry lake bed was made by super-energetic ancient volcanic eruptions. This is actually fractured hyaloclastite rock. Since the volcanoes were going crazy, they heated up and cooled down repeatedly until they created this unique cobbled pattern. On June 20th, 2011, the OceanX diving team discovered something extremely weird. They were searching for treasure in the northern Baltic Sea in the Gulf of Bothnia. Instead, they found an anomaly. The thing, dubbed the Baltic Sea anomaly, logically, looked very weird and unnatural. The anomaly is almost 200 feet wide. It looks like a mushroom rising about 10 to 13 feet from the seabed. It also has a huge disc shape, twice the size of a football field. The main part of the anomaly has straight edges and box-like structures. The top has cracks filled with some unknown black material, and it's not made of metal. The object lies about 300 feet deep in the Gulf's waters. The main mystery is why it's there. This discovery did create buzz in mass media. Some people started saying that it might be a sunken extraterrestrial ship, the remains of Atlantis, or a portal to another world. These claims got even more support when we found weird pavement-like platforms surrounding the object. It kind of looks like a staircase. And on top of that, explorers reported that their electrical equipment, like sonar instruments and satellite phones, malfunctioned near the thing. And it's not even some random reports. Researchers from different institutes said that as well. But scientists think that this is most likely a natural geological formation, even if it doesn't look like it. Although they can't really explain what that formation is supposed to be. They have many theories. It could be linked to human evolution, a glacial deposit from the Ice Age, a result of volcanic activity, and so on. Maybe it's even the remnants of an asteroid that landed on the seafloor thousands of years ago. But none of these theories explain why electronic equipment stops working near it. Who knows? Maybe we'll learn the truth someday. But how about technologies that came to us from the distant past? This strange thing is often called the first known analog computer. It's called the Antikythera mechanism. We discovered the mechanisms in 1901 near the Greek island of Antikythera. It might be from around 87 BCE. They found it in a shipwreck, in incredibly good shape for being so old. The thing was super complex. Machines of similar complexity didn't appear anywhere in the world until the 14th century. There was also a mysterious lump. When they separated into multiple fragments, they found inscriptions inside. They were hard to read because of all the corrosion, but when they deciphered it with X-ray, they discovered that these were the instructions, telling how exactly to use it. Wow, what a gift to archaeologists! So, it turns out the mechanism was made to predict astronomical positions and eclipses decades ahead. Ancient scientists used this computer to track the 4-year cycle of athletic games, similar to the ancient Olympics. The mechanism had a very intricate structure of 37 bronze gears that tracked the movements of celestial objects. But at least here, we know that these things were made by humans, right?
Back in May 2015, David Hull took his metal detector and went looking for gold. He picked the perfect spot for it. Mayaborough near Melbourne, Australia, was the top location down under during the gold rush in the 19th century. The detector beeped, showing there was something precious hiding in the ground. David found a very heavy reddish rock with a weird, dimpled surface resting in some yellow clay. As it turned out later, the find was, indeed, priceless, but only for science. David took the rock home, hoping he'd be able to open it and find a gold nugget inside. He tried a rock saw, an angle grinder, and a drill, and put the rock in acid. Nothing worked. Not even a sledgehammer did the job. A couple of years later, he decided to take the rock to Melbourne Museum and finally find out what it really was. It turned out it was a meteorite, and a rare one. The geologist working at the museum was over the moon, as after years of looking at thousands of rocks that people had thought to be meteorites, he finally got his hands on the real thing. The space origin of the rock explained why it was so unusually heavy. It contained dense forms of iron and nickel, and those guys weigh a lot. And it got its dimpled surface because it started melting when it plunged through Earth's atmosphere. Scientists named the meteorite Marabro after the place where it was found and used a diamond saw to study it better. They sliced off a sliver of the space rock and saw some tiny crystallized droplets of metallic minerals throughout it. Those minerals formed during the early years of our solar system. It means the space guest was around 4.6 billion years old. The researchers are still not quite sure where the meteorite came from or how long it's been on Earth, but they've got some guesses. Our solar system used to be a swirling mix of dust and chondrite rocks. Gravity did its thing and formed planets, but there were some leftovers, and most of them ended up in a massive asteroid belt. The Marabro meteorite likely took a detour from the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. It got bumped out of there by asteroids crashing into each other, and one fine day, it decided to crash into Earth. Carbon dating says that this space rock has been chilling on Earth for somewhere between 100 and 1,000 years. There were meteorite sightings in the 19th century that could match up with when it made its grand entrance. The scientists say the Marabro meteorite is even rarer than gold. It's only the 17th meteorite ever found in the Australian state of Victoria and the second largest. In the 80s, David Mazurek from Michigan decided to buy a farm not far from Mount Pleasant. The new property came with a weird bonus, a large rock that kept the barn door open. The farmer explained the rock was a meteorite. It had literally fallen from the sky in the 30s. The farmer and his father found the crater the meteorite had left and dug out their guest from space, which was still warm. They couldn't think of a better use for it than to serve as a doorstop. I mean, what else can you do with a meteorite? The new owner got to keep the unconventional doorstop and must have grown fond of it. When he was moving to a new home, he took the rock with him and used it for the same purpose for another 30 years. Sometimes David would let his kids take it to school. It must have gotten some easy A's in physics and astronomy. Then he heard that other Michigan residents find and sell pieces of meteorites for some serious cash. Since his piece was an impressive 22 pounds, he decided to take it to Central Michigan University to find out its value. A local geology professor was getting tired of similar requests because, for around 18 years, she had to explain to people all the rocks they had brought her weren't meteorites at all. But this time, she felt it was the real thing. She tested the rock and determined it was a meteorite made from iron and nickel. It turned out to be the 6th largest recorded find of this kind in Michigan, and the most valuable specimen she's ever worked with. They sent a slice for another round of verification to the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C., and soon it was all official. It turned out that the meteorite was a piece of an early solar system. The Smithsonian and a museum in Maine offered some good money for the space rock. Mazurek decided to sell his meteorite to Michigan State University's Abrams Planetarium for $75,000. He generously shared 10% of the money with Central Michigan University's Earth and Atmospheric Sciences Department, where they confirmed the rock's true identity. I hope the money he was left with was enough to buy a new doorstop. While some use meteorites as furniture, scientists have found a way to utilize them to extract oxygen from water on Mars. Traveling to the red planet is impossible without oxygen. We need it both to breathe and fuel rockets for a return trip to Earth. The new robot, called AI Chemist, hunts down a compound that can kickstart a chemical reaction on Mars to produce oxygen. The compound is crafted from elements found in Martian meteorites. This planet only has traces of oxygen in its atmosphere. But scientists have found there's some liquid water underneath the southern ice cap of Mars and more water under its surface. So, they needed to figure out how to break down this water into its hydrogen and oxygen molecules using materials available on the red planet. The AI chemist analyzed 5 meteorites that either came from Mars or were similar to that of its surface. It used a laser to locate large amounts of iron, nickel, calcium, magnesium, aluminum, and manganese in the samples. These elements will be enough to produce more than 3.7 million possible molecules to break down water and generate oxygen on the red planet. Finding the right algorithm for this process would take us humans around 2,000 years, and the robot managed to do it in a matter of weeks. Using the meteorite compound as a catalyst, the robot managed to do its job in negative 35 degrees Fahrenheit on Earth, and it did so without any human help at all. Now, the question is, if it will be able to do the same on Mars, where the atmospheric composition, air density, humidity, gravity, and other conditions are trickier than on Earth. Other scientists previously managed to produce small amounts of oxygen fit for breathing up there. An instrument the size of a lunchbox on NASA's Perseverance rover compressed and heated carbon dioxide from Mars's atmosphere. It generated oxygen at around the same speed as a small tree. I think Matt Damon's character from The Martian would have loved all these advances in space science. Thousands of meteorites crash into our planet every year. 95% of them are thought to come from just 2 sources. 75% from the crust of a big asteroid, and 20% from the mantle of an even larger celestial body that bit the dust ages ago. But in May 2020, researchers stumbled upon some meteorite pieces in the Sahara Desert that were like nothing they'd seen before. They were labeled as ungrouped achondrites, a type of rock that formed from melted minor planets way back in the solar system's early days. This makes the find slightly older than Earth itself. But unlike others of its kind, this meteorite was made out of andesite, which made it even more unique. It could serve as proof that the early protoplanets in the solar system and a ton of other debris either got wrecked or joined forces in building the rocky planets we know today.
I bet you've never heard of the legendary oasis of Zerzura. This ancient city is said to be hidden somewhere deep in the Sahara Desert, and its discovery could mean unimaginable riches and untold secrets. According to an anonymous 15th century Arabic guide, the key to unlocking the city lies in the beak of a bird carved on the city gate. Zerzura might not be as popular as Machu Picchu or the pyramids, but that just makes it more mysterious. Legend has it that Zerzura is built around this big oasis somewhere in the desert west of the Nile. Apparently, it's made out of white stone and has all these luxurious houses and gold decorations. The story goes that a scribe wrote down the account of a traveler who stumbled upon Zerzura while looking for his lost camel. At one point in his journey, the man got caught up in a sandstorm, where he got separated from the rest of his group. The traveler kept wandering in the desert for days, and then, out of nowhere, 2 men showed up and guided him to the city of Zerzura. The traveler described this city as an oasis filled with little birds and made out of pure white stonework. The city is also said to be guarded by giants. In 1835, an English Egyptologist named John Gardner Wilkinson mentioned the city in one of his books. He spoke to a man from Egypt who found the city by accident after days of wandering through the desert. He mentioned some ruins, unusual stonework, and a large oasis surrounded by palm trees. The man even gave some instructions on how the city could be found, indicating that it might be in the western desert of Egypt. But here's the kicker. Even though a group of explorers went out to find Zerzura, they didn't succeed. At the same time, they did stumble upon a bunch of previously unknown oases. In the early 1900s, numerous expeditions were sent to find the city, including one with a fleet of Ford Model A trucks. But, alas, none were successful. Others say Zerzura did exist at one point, but not anymore. It's possible it was swallowed by the desert. It's believed that back in the day, the Sahara Desert was actually green. Scientists even found traces of ancient rivers that flowed through the area 100,000 years ago, creating green corridors across the desert. But Zerzura might have never been real to begin with. Maybe it only existed in the minds of people, a figment of their imagination as they were struggling in the African desert. For thousands of years, people have been obsessed with the hunt for another lost city, Atlantis. But if this place really existed, where on Earth, or under the sea, could it be? According to Plato, Atlantis was an actual place, and it was supposedly located somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, near the Strait of Gibraltar. But how did this mythical city become synonymous with a perfect paradise-like society? Well, you can thank Ignatius Donnelly for that. The American writer published a book in 1882 where he outlined 13 hypotheses about the existence of Atlantis. Donnelly truly believed that this lost city was where ancient humans lived in peace and joy for centuries. Donnelly even thought that Atlantis was the original source of many ancient civilizations around the world. And if we just followed Plato's clues, we could totally find Atlantis. Sounds like a treasure hunt, right? What inspired Donnelly to go on this quest in the first place, you might ask? Apparently, an amateur archaeologist discovered the city of Troy, using Homer's The Iliad as a guide. Well, if Troy was real, then why not Atlantis? Back in the day, some people believed that America was the legendary Atlantis. Columbus really stirred up some excitement when he brought back news about the New World to Europe. But the real hunt for Atlantis didn't really start until the 20th and 21st centuries. Some people tried to connect the dots between a volcanic eruption on the island of Santorini and the destruction of Minoan settlements. But in 2018, a team of investigators claimed they had nailed it, announcing they had discovered concrete proof that Atlantis had existed. What was their evidence, you ask? A series of mysterious circles in a national park in Spain. But the circles turned out to be nothing more than experimental ponds for studying zooplankton. Let's face it, there's no real evidence that Plato's lost city of Atlantis actually existed. But it doesn't make searching for it any less exciting, does it? The Fountain of Youth isn't a lost city per se, but it is another mythical location that many have claimed to have stumbled upon over the years. Long ago, people were obsessed with the idea of living forever, or at least extending their lives as much as possible. Each culture had its own wild story, like the Greeks talking about a magic fountain that let people live longer, or Alexander the Great finding a river of paradise that could heal the wounded. Japanese legends spoke of hot springs that could make you young again, while the Caribbean locals talked about the restorative powers of the water in one of their own mystical lands. Explorers searched far and wide for these magical waters, but nothing. Probably the most famous of all was the story of the Spanish explorer Juan Ponce de Leon, who thought he'd found it in Florida. Now, Ponce de Leon was quite a character. He sailed with Columbus and became an important figure in the area now known as the Dominican Republic. He found gold in Puerto Rico and even became the island's administrator. But when the ruler of Spain decided to replace him in his duties, he got upset and decided to explore Florida, looking for gold and the elusive Fountain of Youth. He explored the Bahamas, but sadly, he didn't find any gold or magic water. He did, however, make his way to Florida. He explored the coast and even discovered the Gulf Stream. Unfortunately, his last expedition didn't go well, and he was wounded. But the legend of him searching for the Fountain of Youth lived on. Even though historians don't think he was really looking for the Fountain of Youth, thousands of people visit the Fountain of Youth Archaeological Park every year to try the sulfur-smelling water. It's the oldest attraction in Florida, which has been around since the 17th century. Some say the water has unusual properties, but I'll leave that up to you to decide after you visit this place. Norse mythology has its own mysterious land called Thule. It's said to be somewhere between Scandinavia and Iceland, where the sun barely shines and the cold bites hard. The folks there survive on a diet of millet, herbs, fruits, and roots, washed down with a grain and honey brew. As for its exact location, scholars can't seem to agree on it to this day. The legendary ancient Greek explorer Pytheas was said to be the first to stumble upon Thule during his quest for tin mines. He sailed his way up north, passing by Scotland, and after 6 long days of sailing, he reached Thule. The people there, according to Pytheas, were quite primitive, but that's no surprise since they were just simple farmers living off the land. They showed Pytheas where the sun set on the shortest day of the year. They also told him that in winter, the sun never rose at all, and in summer, there was no night. For many years, historians have been debating the true identity of this mythical land of Thule. Some say it's Iceland, while others claim it's Norway. A little bit of progress has been made recently with the help of a team of researchers. If their findings are correct, Thule might be the elusive island of Smola. That's farther south than any of the Norwegian islands that were on the list of contenders. It may be too soon to celebrate, but it does look like Thule has finally been found.
It's nighttime, and you're about to walk inside Pharaoh Tutankhamun's final resting place. You know, King Tut. You don't have a torch, but at least you came with a flashlight. You walk down several flights of stairs and observe how the walls are carved in hieroglyphics and what looks like a spell. Those who take anything from this place will be doomed for life, the spell says. Even if you don't really believe it, this scares you a little bit. You find a huge stone door. Is it a trap? You manage to open it, but oh no, it's only an empty chamber. You check your map. It seems like you're heading in the right direction. After what feels like hours, you realize you must be trapped inside a labyrinth. You try to retrace your steps, but you can't find the door where you came in from anymore. That's it, you think to yourself. You've fallen for the Pharaoh's trap. What's worse, you didn't bring a lunch. Okay, so we've all seen Hollywood movies where the main character is exploring ancient ruins and faces some seriously dangerous traps, right? We've been told Egyptian royalty protected their final resting places with venomous scorpions and snakes, sliding doors that will trap you for life, and giant rolling boulders that will crush anyone on their paths. The thing is, were these traps truly real? Well, I regret to be the one to break it to you, but this is all fiction. These elaborate traps were too technologically advanced for ancient civilizations to pull off. That is not to say, however, that there weren't any traps at all. Ancient civilizations, like the Egyptians and the Mayans, are known for their practice of building entire monuments dedicated to the ones who had passed away. These structures would often reflect the position of person occupied in society. So, for the really important people, the VIPs of their times, massive monuments were built to host their bodies long after they were gone. Some of these civilizations believed that a person's life would continue on the other side of the veil. For that reason, a person would be buried together with the belongings of their current life. If they had a lot of money and power and stuff, that meant their resting places would be filled with riches and gold. Now imagine if you lived in ancient Egypt and you knew exactly where all the pharaoh's tombs were located and had heard rumors of the amount of wealth kept in these places. Maybe you would be tempted to go check it out, right? We're talking about large rooms filled from floor to ceiling with golden artifacts, jewels, and even money. I mean, it does sound tempting. And since there weren't any security guards protecting the entrance of these places, Egyptians needed to get creative as to how they would protect these riches. These old civilizations found some traps to be useful. A recurring one was building empty rooms inside the monument to confuse a burglar. Now, let's take a look at Amenhotep III's final resting place as an example. It was built in the city of Luxor, in a spot also known as the Western Valley of the Kings. Two French engineers originally discovered the monument between 1905 and 1914 CE. The structure is huge and has more than 10 chambers, connected by long corridors and steep stairways. The King's Chamber is the most hidden one, and for an outsider to try and find it, they will probably enter a lot of empty rooms beforehand. Other pharaohs tried to protect their riches by commissioning monuments with false doors concealing pits that were up to 20 feet deep. This way, an unwarned and unwanted visitor would be surprised by the deep hole on their way to the king's resting chamber. Alongside false doors, pharaohs made sure to build labyrinth-style corridors and false walls. This way, robbers could take hours or days before they found the king's real chamber. As to pits with poisonous snakes on them, if there were any reptiles inside these monuments, they probably got inside on their own, and would most likely not stay there for long. There is no way snakes would survive years and years without food inside these pits. So yes, another Hollywood-induced belief right there. If these traps seem boring to you, archaeologists did find an interesting deterrent in the final resting place of the Red Queen of Palenque in Mexico. Palenque was one of the most powerful Mayan cities in pre-Columbian Mexico, and the Red Queen was believed to be the grandmother of the last Mayan king, undoubtedly a person of immense importance to the empire. In her honor, a huge monument was built to keep her body after her passing. The discovery of the tomb itself was already thrilling. Archaeologists found an ancient monument when digging at the site back in 1994. The first thing they found was a room with a hidden door. Once they opened the door, they discovered a long corridor. Finally, at the end of this corridor was the Queen's chamber. The team of archaeologists was beyond excited to unearth this chamber with the mummy of the Queen herself still inside it. They found her to be accompanied by her pearls, jade shells, and expensive rocks. But as the team explored the remains, they saw something rather strange. The room was filled with a red-colored powder. Researchers knew that the color red was important to the Mayan people, and that much of their clothing and buildings were decorated with this color. But they didn't understand why the queen was buried with this unknown red substance. After they took a sample back with them for further analysis, they discovered that the red powder was cinnabar, a very dangerous mineral. This powder, when inhaled, can cause, shall we say, severe health damage to a person. The team concluded that this could only be a trap for anyone trying to steal her riches. Okay, so dangerous powders might have worked as the most intense traps we've seen until now. But perhaps the cheapest way to keep out unwanted visitors was to advertise spells written out all over the monument. We'd probably laugh at these today, but back in the day, they were more or less effective. Spells usually said that the person who took anything from that place would meet a tragic fate. Some spells said that robbers would lose their houses in big fires or terrible floods. Other spells said burglars would have incurable and undiagnosed health issues, but they weren't really enough to stop people from taking any gold. There are some stories surrounding how these spells might have been real. One of them is from the famous British Egyptologist Howard Carter, the one responsible for unearthing Pharaoh Tutankhamen's resting place in the 1920s. After months of unsuccessful digging, Carter discovered the tomb's existence by chance. He found the entrance to a stairway right beneath the soil where he had been searching all those months. With the help of a team, he cleared the piles of sand blocking the stairs and discovered a doorway. The door had several royal symbols carved into it, and Carter knew this could only mean a very important person had been buried there. And he was right. With a chisel, he made a hole in the top left-hand corner of the doorway and lit his vision with the help of a candle. He couldn't believe what he was seeing, the reflection of several golden and jeweled items crowding the chamber before him. Lost for 3,000 years, Carter had just discovered the final resting place of King Tut. But the story didn't finish here. This discovery was accompanied by a series of unfortunate events that led people to believe it had something to do with the pharaoh's spell. Carter himself mysteriously passed away just a few years later, and some of his assistants lost their houses in floods, just like one of the spells threatened. Some say it's just coincidental, as there's no real proof of these things being connected. Well, what do you think? Was this an effective trap after all? So what comes to your mind when you hear the word Antarctica? Most likely, cold, snow, ice, and penguins. Yet, this is one of the least explored regions in the world that hides many strange and unique things. Check them out. You don't have to go to Antarctica to see this weird thing. All you need to do is open Google Earth and move to one of the southernmost islands of Antarctica, King George Island. Recently, internet users have noticed a large and pretty strange cave entrance there. Where does this wide, dark passage lead? People started making suggestions. It's the entrance to a secret base or some laboratory. This is the part of the spaceship that crashed there thousands of years ago. This is the door to the ancient city of Antarctica. Perhaps there's a giant rock mountain with an ancient cave beneath all this snow and ice. Well, there's some ideas. Users have calculated the approximate dimensions of this cave. It might be about 74 feet high and 250 feet wide. You could hide a Boeing passenger jet in there. Nature probably created this entrance. This is a logical explanation, but there are two strange factors. First, take a look at the foot of the mountain. It seems that there are steps there. They're dark in color, as if they're made of stone. And if you look closely, you can notice something similar to human footprints. Has anyone entered this cave? Or maybe someone is still living there now. The second oddity is the disappearance of the mysterious finding. For the first time, people noticed it in a Google Maps snap in 2007. Then the entrance disappeared. Then it reappeared a few years later. After that, it vanished. And in 2022, people saw it again. Perhaps old snow melts, a new layer falls, and then the wind blows it away and the cycle repeats. But the alleged steps leading deep into the cave make one doubt the natural origin of this tunnel. You can easily find the coordinates on the internet and visit the cave via Google Earth. You might see something there and tell the world. There's another strange thing people discovered with the help of Google Earth. In 2020, one user found a strange object that looked like a giant ship 100 miles off the coast of Antarctica. It was covered with ice and snow and lying on its side. It looked like a cruise ship. You could notice the windows, the deck, and the bridge. But not all people agreed with this. Some claimed it was a spaceship. Others said it was some kind of secret building. The user who first noticed the ship stated that its size was about 400 feet, which is the perfect length for a passenger vessel. But what is this ship doing in such a remote place in the middle of a glacier? How did it get here? Who was its captain? No one has found the answers to these questions yet. In 2016, people using Google Earth discovered a photo of an unknown sea monster floating off the coast of Antarctica. This creature resembled a giant squid with a length of about 200 feet. This is slightly shorter than 3 train cars. Just imagine this kraken swimming in Antarctica's dark, icy waters and dragging to the bottom everything it meets on its way. Maybe it's the great and terrible Chulu, or one of its offspring. You will quickly notice this blood-red waterfall among Antarctica's endless, dazzling white landscapes. Don't worry, it's not blood. For many centuries, the waterfall has been painting snow in a bright red color. The stream flows straight out of a white iceberg. Let's look inside and find out what's happening there. Millions of years ago, there was a small crystal-clear pond, but then a glacier formed around it. A thick layer of ice and snow blocked sunlight, heat, and oxygen access. For millennia, the reservoir remained in this cold vacuum. But at one point, the water made a hole in the icy wall and broke out. When this salty water comes into contact with oxygen, it immediately turns scarlet or rusty. Antarctica is the only place where you can find such a unique natural phenomenon.
I'm about to introduce you to a place where the laws of physics take a vacation. Welcome to the mystery spot, where you can witness all kinds of implausible things that will leave you scratching your head in disbelief. Don't worry, it's not sorcery or witchcraft. It's just some clever optical illusions that mess with your brain and make you question reality. Back in the day, when the Great Depression was hitting hard, people needed some fun distractions. That's how the entertainment industry gave birth to the concept of mystery spots. One of the most famous mystery spots is the one near Santa Cruz, California. The name is all intrigue and mystique, isn't it? Once you step inside, you'll see people standing upright on a slanted floor or at impossible angles on a flat surface. You'll see a ball rolling up a ramp, defying gravity and logic. It's like being in a funhouse, but without creepy clowns. The site is known for its gravity-defying demonstrations, which appear to bend the laws of physics, both on the short uphill walk and inside the wooden building on the site. Misperceptions of the height and orientation of objects occur here. These visual illusions include balls rolling uphill and people leaning farther than normally possible without falling down. Psychologists at Berkeley state that all of the misperceptions stem from the simple fact that the house is slanted at a 20-degree angle. The next stop is again in the USA, but this time at Hoover Dam in Nevada. Here, gravity seems to play with us too. Try this experiment if you ever happen to go there. Pour water from a bottle over the dam. You will witness that instead of going down, the water will start flowing upward. The reason behind this is a very powerful updraft that the structure of the dam creates. In other words, the water gets carried upward by the wind. This trick is not unique to the dam, as there's a reverse waterfall in the Faroe Islands. It occurs due to a wild weather phenomenon known as an inverted waterfall. Imagine a gigantic whirlwind of ocean spray swirling up a steep, 1,542-foot high rocky cliff. So how does this crazy phenomenon happen, you ask? Well, it's all thanks to a spiral column of air that rotates near high and steep cliffs, creating a mini tornado effect. And when the wind hits the edge of the cliff, it gets even stronger and picks up coastal water, which then splashes up the cliff and creates a massive water and wind funnel. Apparently, these inverted waterfalls can happen in other places too, like on the cliffs of Moher in Ireland, the mountains of Iceland, and even in the Waipuhia Falls of Hawaii. Talk about Mother Nature showing off her skills. Magnetic Hill in Ladakh, India? The ultimate mind-bending road trip destination? Here, you can watch objects and cars roll uphill like they're stuck in some kind of magnetic vortex. It's an optical illusion that occurs thanks to the sneaky slopes and general layout of the area. The road might look like it's going uphill, but it's actually a downhill road in disguise, playing tricks on your brain like a mischievous magician. You might also see your car moving by itself in the neutral gear. No, your car isn't haunted. It's just basic physics at work. Even when the engine is off, the wheels can still turn, thanks to momentum and the subtle slope of the road. Mount Aragats has a similar story to the Magnetic Hill of India. This one, too, is like a magnet for thrill seekers and car enthusiasts. It's located on the border between Turkey and Armenia. It has a reputation for making cars defy gravity. People from all over the world visit this mountain to witness the incredible spectacle, where a car parked on the slope seems to roll uphill all by itself without any driver behind the wheel. There's a nearby river that flows uphill too. People who visited this site claim that it's easier to go up than down there. Number 6 on the list is the Golden Boulder from Myanmar. The rock looks like it's about to tumble down the hill at any moment, but it's not going anywhere. It's been sitting there for over 2,500 years. The rock is the centerpiece of a stunning pagoda that sits on top of it, towering 49 feet above the ground. According to legend, the rock is held in place by none other than a strand of Buddha's hair. It's no wonder that this place is one of the most important Buddhist pilgrimage sites in Myanmar. The rock was chosen by a celestial king who was impressed by a Buddhist monk's incredible asceticism. So, he used his supernatural powers to carefully place the rock in its current spot, where it looked like the monk's head. If that's not enough, it's said that only a woman can move the boulder. That's why women aren't allowed to touch it. So, if you're up for an adventure, head over to this magnificent rock and pagoda and witness this gravity-defying feat for yourself. Back to the US. Oregon Vortex is located on Sardine Creek, Oregon. It's a tourist attraction that's been around since 1930. The owners of the attraction claim that it's some paranormal activity, but it's pretty obvious some clever optical illusions are involved. Legend has it that even before the attraction was built, Native Americans in the area warned that this land was forbidden, and horses refused to go there. But then, some gold miners built an assay office there in 1904, and the building ended up sliding to a wonky angle. Now picture this. You're in a cozy spot, away from city light pollution, staring up at billions of stars putting on a sparkling show above you. But if you're lucky enough to be in Marfa, Texas, you'll get a little something extra. Mysterious orbs decide to join in on the fun, shining bright like a diamond, and they've been doing it for over 100 years. But what are these glowing orbs called Marfa lights? Well, everyone has their own theories. Some people think they're just car lights from the nearby highway, but that's no fun. Others believe that these orbs are actually sentient beings trying to convey some sort of important message to us, mere mortals. Imagine standing at the edge of a stunning lake, admiring the picturesque view of a majestic volcano. Suddenly, you hear a loud boom and flames shoot up into the air like a fireworks show gone wild. But don't worry, it's not an eruption, it's just the Kauai'an Lake and volcano doing its thing. This fiery spectacle is caused by a natural phenomenon where sulfuric gases burst through the rocks and ignite upon contact with the outside air. The result? Flames that soar up to 16 feet in height, burning blue like the coolest neon lights you've ever seen. And if that's not enough, the liquid sulfur that streams down the mountain looks like a molten river of electric blue lava. It's equal parts terrifying and breathtaking, and a sight you won't soon forget. Speaking of unforgettable things, the Richat structure in Mauritania has been an eye-catching enigma for astronauts since the dawn of the NASA space program. This circular feature in Earth's crust was created by a raised dome that was eroded over time, revealing the original flat rock layers. As you move from the center of the structure outward, you travel back in time, as the older rock layers are exposed in the middle. This geological phenomenon is made up of sedimentary and igneous rocks and measures 28 miles across. From space, you can see several faults where the rock layers have shifted and have been pulled apart. The Richat structure is situated in the heart of the Sahara Desert. There you go. This is our version of the top 10. Would you add something else to this list?
They say this place is swarming with money. It's been stored there for centuries, but no one managed to take it away from this island. Treasure hunters have been bewitched with this place since 1795. Many people have tried their luck looking for the treasure that could be hidden there by the Spanish pirates or even by the Knights Templar. But today, it's impossible to get there, as it's a private place, so all you can do is book an ocean tour around this island. Otherwise, you can take a peek at it in a TV reality show starring the Legina brothers, Rick and Marty, who are a team of enthusiasts looking for the treasures of Oak Island in Nova Scotia, Canada. Yeah, seems like there's no place where TV producers can't get to. One of the most famous discoveries out there was the so-called Money Pit. Despite the promising name, it wasn't full of money. Now we have to jump to 200 years ago. The Money Pit was first found by a 16-year-old kid in 1795. One day, Daniel McGinnis went fishing at Oak Island. He saw a tree there. Unsurprisingly, it was an oak, and it had weird markings. They didn't seem to be natural, so Daniel decided to check the area. He then saw a sunken patch of ground and started digging immediately. His two friends helped him out, but instead of treasures, the guys only found logs placed underground at regular intervals. It looked like a place where someone could hide money or jewels, but nothing precious was found. However, there was something curious down that pit. Someone found a granite stone there, and it had an engraved inscription on it. There were many attempts to decode it, but most of them ended up in failure. There's one translation though, and it says, 40 feet below, 2 million pounds are buried. Yeah, McGinnis and his friends should have dug harder. The next fun thing about the Money Pit is the coconut fiber found down there. They say that large amounts of this fiber were found at a depth of 60 feet. It may not surprise you, but I have to remind you of one thing. Oak Island is in Nova Scotia, Canada, coconut trees do not grow there. The nearest one is about 1,500 miles from Nova Scotia, which makes it obvious that someone brought this fiber purposefully. Researchers came up with an idea that coconut fiber could have been used to make ropes and lower all the treasures down the pit. Next up, we have not one, but two mysteries. In the late 1800s, the Oak Island Treasure Company was thoroughly inspecting and excavating the island. Everyone believed something enormous was hidden there. These guys managed to drill 153 feet underground. That's like 15 stop signs stacked one on top of the other. You might have guessed that they didn't find pounds of gold and diamonds, but they found a manuscript. There's a theory claiming that it's one of Shakespeare's lost manuscripts. Some scientists believe that it was hidden there by the writer and scientist Francis Bacon, the true author of Shakespeare's works. Yeah, rumor has it was Francis and not William who wrote all the plays and sonnets. But there's no proof it was really so. The Money Pit may be the most popular shaft on Oak Island, but it's not the only one, and it's not the first. Before the Money Pit discovery, treasure hunters were drilling at Smith's Cove. While damming there, they found a wooden piece. It was a U-shaped formation that had Roman numerals. After a more thorough inspection, the specialists realized it was supposedly dated to 1769. The Money Pit was discovered 26 years later. This fact created many speculations that this structure might have been part of the real shaft with treasures everyone was looking for. Now, look at this Templar coin. It wasn't the first discovery on the island, but it was crucial in some way. Even if it may not sound like a big deal today, in medieval times, those coins would amass an insane amount of wealth. They were typically stored in European fortresses. For the treasure hunters, this coin was a sure sign there was more to be found on the island. The logic is simple. If there's one coin of that kind, there must be something else. And they were right. It wasn't the only Templar discovery. On the southwest shore of the island, a crossbow bolt was found. Experts say it dates back to the 13th century. But, once again, that wasn't something the treasure hunters were after. Some more coins were found on the island. Rick and Marty Legina retrieved this precious piece from a swamp. The coin is made of copper, and this time, it originated from Spain. When it was found, the Legina brothers could only see the number 8 engraved on it. But later on, some experts studied this coin and claimed it was made sometime around the 17th century. They managed to clean it well and saw the date 1652 engraved on the back of this coin. There's a theory stating that Spanish explorers found some treasure but hid it instead of taking it to the king. So maybe this coin just dropped out of the chest full of coins and jewels and is part of the treasure everyone was after. Or someone could have accidentally lost it while looking for the treasure. Who knows?
When you think of an epic desert scene with blazing sun, endless dunes, and those magical little oases, you probably picture the legendary Sahara, right? But what if I tell you that 11,000 years ago, this vast expanse of hot sand looked totally different than it does today? Yeah, I don't know, I wasn't around then. But I'm told that back then, what we now call a desert was a lush paradise, brimming with lakes, rivers, grassy plains, and even woodsy forests. So, where did all this water go? There are many stories about the distant past of our planet when deserts were covered with jungles and forests. And then something happened, like changing climates or colossal earthquakes, and it all turned green lands into dunes. But how about a theory that Sahara became a desert because of humans and goats? The Sahara has seen its fair share of wet and dry drama throughout the ages, mostly thanks to little shifts in Earth's orbital tilt, causing variations in how much solar radiation hits the atmosphere. There were even times called the African humid periods, when the rain would pour in and transform the dry landscape into a bright green haven. But between 8,000 and 4,500 years ago, something really funky happened to this region. Certain areas went from humid to dry, way too fast to explain it by just orbital changes. In the blink of an eye, the lush Sahara turned into the Sahara we know today. Now, if you ask scientists why it happened, they will tell you, oh, it's just poor parameterization of the data. Bet you didn't get it, did you? Well, right, let me translate it from scientific to common human. It means they really don't know the answer themselves, and they got a bunch of missing puzzle pieces. But as scientists sifted through ancient dirt and pollen samples, they spotted a quirky trend. Wherever there were pastoralists, also known as humans with their domesticated animals, the plant life seemed to shift. It was as if every time humans and their furry friends meandered through the greenery, they turned it into scrub and desert right behind them. Oops. Yep, chances are that by overgrazing, humans were sapping moisture out of the atmosphere, since plants give off moisture, which helps make clouds and making things even sunnier, leading to a quicker end of the humid vibes. Plus, our ancestors may have been getting a little too cozy with fire for land management, further speeding up the desert takeover. Anyway, scientists are sure that this lush Sahara would have turned back into desert eventually, even if humans hadn't shown up, thanks to Earth's natural rhythms. So there's no need to pin this abrupt change solely on humans. It could simply be about nature getting feedback from vegetation and dust cycles. It's difficult to determine what caused these changes, as it's all interconnected. During the last humid period, the Sahara was filled with hunter-gatherers. As things got a little drier, they started herding animals for food. The weather pushed people to herd cattle. It's also possible that grazing sped up the landscape degradation. So, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Or in this case, the human or the cow? It's tough to tell with the evidence we have now. Now today, it's safe to say that water is no longer that big of a problem in the Sahara, even though it's a huge desert and the times of lush forests there are long gone. But technology's got us covered. For example, the Nubian Sandstone Aquifer System, the biggest underground water stash on the planet. It's nestled beneath the Sahara Desert's eastern edge and stretches across 4 northeastern African countries – Sudan, Chad, Libya, and Egypt, covering a whopping 770,000 square miles and holding around 36,000 square miles of groundwater. Just look at the pipes transported when it was being built. It's the world's largest irrigation project. No wonder it's feasible to thrive in the Sahara today. But imagine thriving in the Sahara Desert with just one water source. Sounds like a tough gig, right? But the ancient Garamantes did just that, surviving and even thriving for nearly 1,000 years without monsoons or rivers flowing to their desert paradise. These clever folks were the trendsetters of urban life in the sands, and even the Romans couldn't help but notice their genius. While many thought they were just desert-dwelling savages, the Garamantes were busy building an empire in one of the toughest climates on Earth. But how did they do that? Well, they got crafty and dug a whole bunch of underground tunnels to tap into a massive sandstone aquifer. They were literally squeezing every drop of life from under the dunes. But recently, research showed that the Garamantes weren't just hardworking, they were pretty lucky too. The Garamantes had an underground aquifer that brought water up to a hill where they built over 500 fagras, which are irrigation systems, some stretching as long as 2.5 miles. It was like sipping water through a straw, which let them irrigate their crops for nearly a century, especially since even a little rain would help recharge the system. But eventually, due to rain insufficiency, the aquifer ran low, and reaching it again would have meant digging more tunnels and relying on more people. That's a tough problem, considering these people were in the middle of food and water shortages. Guess I don't need to tell you what happened to the Garamantes, do I? The fall of the Garamantian culture might be linked to several factors. It may have been due to climate changes, or they may have simply used their water resources too much. Back in the day, the Sahara Desert was actually fertile agricultural land, thanks in part to the cool irrigation system the Garamantians created. But since fossil water isn't something you can replenish over time, the groundwater levels dropped pretty low. This likely played a big role in the kingdom's decline by the late 7th century CE. That sounds like someone who hit a lottery jackpot, used up all the money, and went back to their original not-so-cool job once the bank account got fully drained. Oh, by the way, even if the Garamantes left some secret wisdom messages for us, the chances are we'll never get what they wanted to tell us. Nobody really knows what language they used, and their texts are nearly indecipherable to us today. But let's go back to the Green Sahara. So it transformed into a desert about 4,500 years ago. But today, we can understand how people lived in those times in the Sahara thanks to natural parks in Africa that have the ultimate outdoor art gallery. There are well over 15,000 ancient paintings and carvings depicting everyday life from around 11,000 years ago. However, if the carvings aren't enough for you and you feel like visiting an actual green desert, all you have to do is book a flight to California. One of the most beautiful phenomenon in the world, the superbloom, takes place here. Look at all these colors: orange, green, pink. It's a miracle. Wildflowers bloom right in the middle of a hot desert after several years of rainfall in dry places. It's such a bright and colorful landscape that superblooms can be seen from space. This rare phenomenon can be observed in other arid places and deserts in western and southern Africa, western Australia, and Chile. In all these places, the weather is very hot and dry in summer. Mild humid air comes in winter, and this is the ideal environment for mass flowering. Flower seeds that lie in desert sands can wait for decades before starting to produce flowers. When the hot sun destroys all the weeds and grass, and the rainfall becomes enough to moisten the soil, the seeds are kind of like, well, okay, now it's our turn to play a big game. And then hundreds of thousands of tourists come to take photos and post these beautiful pictures on social media. And this, unfortunately, is one of the main dangers for flowers. Therefore, if you find yourself in a place like this, don't pick the flowers and don't trample on them. Stay on the path, don't litter. Take only pictures and leave only footprints. You get it? Good.
In 1850, French scientist Auguste Mariette went to Egypt looking for manuscripts, but accidentally found a head of a sphinx sticking out of the dunes. He cleared the sand and figured out the sphinx was guiding the entrance to some underground construction. Several months later, he finally entered the Serapeum of Saqqara. Inside, he found an enormous granite sarcophagi with remnants of 64 bulls. Scientists are still amazed by the tech that the ancient Egyptians used to transport those enormous boxes. The Serapeum was built around the year 3000 before the Common Era. It was an underground tomb built to honor the sacred Apis bulls of ancient Egypt. It had a long hallway, almost 500 feet long, with giant stone rooms on both sides. Some of the sarcophagi weighed as much as 50 average cars, and all of them were made with super precision with exact 90-degree angles. These sarcophagi were beautifully decorated with hieroglyphs and carvings that told stories about the lives and importance of the Apis bulls. Now, there are 24 sarcophagi left. In ancient Egypt, Apis bulls were very special animals connected to the deity Ptah. They thought the bulls carried Ptah's spirit and wisdom, helped the pharaoh, and protected the Egyptians. Priests looked for special markings on young bulls to find Apis bulls. It could be a white triangle on its forehead, which symbolized divine light, a shape on its back like a vulture's wing, and a scarab shape under its tongue, which stood for rebirth. The size of boxes is way larger than the size of bulls, yet they buried pharaohs in tiny coffins that barely fit their bodies. The sarcophagi are made out of granite with crazy precision, and they could have just used limestone, which would have made things way easier. The transportation of the boxes seems pretty simple, but only in theory. If one person could pull about 440 pounds, then at least 250 people would be needed to pull just one box. The tunnels in the Serapeum are really narrow, only about 2 feet wider than the boxes themselves. There's no way hundreds of people could have squeezed into those tight spaces to pull the boxes. And even if they did, how would they turn the box in the cramped corridor, lower it into its niche, and place it perfectly in the middle? Somehow they did this 24 times, and every box is centered perfectly. Plus, the chambers were dusty, and there were no signs of soot from lamps. This means they must have worked in almost complete darkness. The real use of the boxes could also be different. A long time ago, even before the Egyptian pharaohs ruled, the local people already knew how to use fermentation. It happens when tiny organisms called yeast eat certain ingredients like starch and turn them into gas and ethanol. So someone in ancient Egypt probably put food like barley, bread, and even meat inside a giant stone box, then closed it tight with a heavy lid. These stone boxes, carved from granite, were so precisely made that they were almost completely sealed, so nothing could escape from it. As the yeast inside the box started working, it created more and more CO2 gas. It built up pressure inside the box. The granite boxes were incredibly strong. They could handle more pressure than a car tire can hold. When granite was squeezed under such pressure, its crystals produced a tiny electric charge. This effect was possible because granite contains quartz, a material that reacts to pressure this way. The process also needed meat or animal parts, possibly to help the yeast grow better. Meat contains something called oleic acid, which yeast needs to keep growing and to survive the bad effects of the ethanol it produces. As the pressure inside the box kept growing, the combination of gases and electricity made these boxes not just ancient fridges, but powerful energy systems. Over time, the pressure inside got so strong that it could push the lid open and the gas would escape with a pop. But when people rediscovered the Serapeum in 1850, they found old drawings that showed piles of stones stacked on top of some of the box lids. So, someone long ago probably tried to make the lids even heavier by adding extra weight to make it harder for the gas pressure to push them open. This extra weight also meant the quartz crystals in the granite could keep creating more electricity under all that pressure. If someone opened one of these stone boxes thousands of years later, they would only find bones from bulls that were placed in the box. And that's exactly what Marriott discovered in the 1850s. They opened the Serapeum for visitors soon after the first excavations in the second half of the 19th century. Prince of Wales even had a luncheon with his guests in one of the sarcophagi. Sands and earthquakes made the site inaccessible for a while, but now you can visit it again and try to solve the mystery yourself. With new tech, we could have answers to many other historical mysteries soon. A team of scientists at Chicago's Field Museum of Natural History recently used a special CT scanner to learn more about ancient Egyptian mummies without unwrapping them. They gently rolled 26 mummies on custom carts out to the parking lot, where the scanner was waiting. It took thousands of detailed X-ray pictures of each mummy and their coffins. When all the pictures were put together, they created 3D images that showed what was inside, the skeletons, and some artifacts. The scientists hope these images will help them understand ancient Egyptian burial practices from over 3,000 years ago. Even though the scanning process only took 4 days, it might take 3 years to study all the data. But scientists were able to learn some personal details about the mummies. One of the most popular mummified individuals at the museum, Lady Cheneta, was a woman who lived in ancient Egypt about 3,000 years ago. It looks like she passed away in her late 30s or early 40s. To make sure her body looked complete for the afterlife, embalmers put stuffing in her neck to keep it from collapsing. They also placed artificial eyes in her sockets, so she would have eyes in the next world. She was wrapped in fancy linen and placed in a beautifully decorated coffin. The scans revealed that it had been carefully crafted with a slit at the back, which embalmers used to fit the body. There were also some artistic details on the surface, like markings for her knees. It looks like her burial was on the scale of a high-end luxury car.
Ooh, so check this out. Researchers just found some super old footprints from a family of extinct humans, like we're talking 300,000 years ago. The prints belong to a group of Homo heidelbergensis. Ooh, that's a tough one, but I nailed it. So those dudes were pretty advanced for their time. They were building homes and hunting big animals. But unfortunately, they couldn't handle climate change and disappeared about 28,000 years ago. No, they weren't sissies, trust me. The weather was really tough back then, and they couldn't just go grab a down jacket like you do. So, the University of Tübingen crew made the discovery in Germany, where they found the perfectly preserved prints in a forest by a lake. Apparently, elephants, rhinos, and other critters used to come relax by the lake, and so did this Heidelberg family. The scientists believe they were probably just a family outing rather than a group of adult hunters, since there were little kid footprints too. And depending on the season, they could munch on plants, fruits, leaves, shoots, and mushrooms around the lake. Experts even found tracks from an extinct elephant species that used to weigh up to 13 tons. Now, can you imagine seeing one of those in person? Just so you know, 13 tons is about 45 times as heavy as a pig. Oink. They were digging around in Schöningen when they stumbled upon some elephant tracks that were 21 inches long. That's like the length of a really big ruler. They even found wood fragments in the ruts that the elephants had left behind. But wait, there's more. They also found a rhino print from the Pleistocene era, which is pretty wild. It's the first time they found a footprint from this particular species in Europe. Who knew rhinos had such big feet? Except those whom the rhino stepped on. Meanwhile, over in New Mexico, some British and American archaeologists found some ancient human footprints that date back 23,000 years. They used radiocarbon dating to figure out when these footprints were made, and it turns out they were stomped into the mud during the last glacial maximum. That's when ice sheets covered much of North America and sea levels were lower than they are now. Now, we've always thought that humans first made their way to North America between 13,000 and 16,000 years ago. But these footprints suggest that our ancestors were wandering around way earlier than that. Some people even think that humans might have been hanging out in North America as far back as 33,000 years ago, although not everyone is convinced. Alrighty, if there were footprints, there must have also been some shoes too, am I right? Well, researchers may not have found signature Gucci loafers, even though they've been around since 1953, but they did find a cave in Armenia full of ancient artifacts from the Copper Age. And guess what? Those artifacts included a seriously well-preserved shoe that's now the oldest footwear ever found. That footwear was made from a single piece of cowhide leather, which is pretty rare today, despite all the fancy schmancy technological upgrades we've got today. Talk about premium quality. Currently, the coolest modern-day designer shoes are trying to copy this hole-cut technique. The shoe was also rubbed with some kind of plant or vegetable oil for extra durability, and it even had shoelaces that crisscrossed through a series of holes, just like our beloved sneakers today. The shoe was about the size of a woman's US 7, so we're guessing it was tailor-made for some fancy-pants wealthy person. Can you imagine rocking these feet whips back in the day? They were possibly the talk of the town. Now, since we're talking about shoes, have you ever had that gross feeling when you step in something sticky? Especially if you're wearing a brand new pair of white sneakers? No, not what you're thinking. I'm talking about chewing gum. It's a total buzzkill to have it stuck to your shoe. A super cool British archaeology student named Serapeum found a 5,000-year-old piece of Neolithic chewing gum made from birch bark tar while on a dig in Finland. It even had tooth marks in it. Who knew our ancestors were into chewing gum too? Apparently, birch bark tar has antiseptic properties, so it's believed that Neolithic peeps chewed it to help treat mouth and gum infections. So it looks like people have been spitting out gum since the beginning of time. Ah, what a tradition. Prehistoric designers had way more than just shoes to offer to prehistoric fashionistas. You're not going to find such a statement piece in the mass market, and I'm not sure about high-end boutiques either. Yep, it's supposedly the oldest purse ever found, and yep, those are dog teeth used as decorations for a handbag. According to one of the archaeologists, these teeth were all the rage back in 2500 BCE. People were putting them on everything, from clothes to jewelry. But this particular handbag was something special. It had over a dozen sets of teeth and was super fancy, which means whoever owned it was perhaps a VIP. Unfortunately, the purse itself didn't survive the test of time. All that's left are these teeth, pointing in the same direction and looking like a modern-day handbag flap. It must have been truly chic back in the day, but it's a good thing we've moved on to more humane materials for our accessories. Did you hear about the dino-sized discovery on Yorkshire's coast? Yep, sometimes scientists discover not human footprints, but dino footprints. This time, they found a record-breaking dinosaur print that could have been left by a predator taking a break 166 million years ago. Can you imagine a T-Rex lounging on the beach with a smoothie in hand? This 3-foot-long fossil, spotted in Burniston Bay near Scarborough, is the largest ever discovered in the region. The team of researchers who studied the track concluded that it was made by a giant carnivore like a megalosaurus. That's one big and hungry dino. The footprint is the largest made by a theropod, which is a group of bipedal dinosaurs that includes the infamous Tyrannosaurus rex. So, we're talking about some seriously big and scary creatures here. A paleontologist from the University of Manchester said the discovery had shed new light on the behavior of these carnivorous giants. Apparently, features of the footprint suggest that this large predator was squatting down before standing up. Maybe it was doing some yoga or taking a bathroom break. Who knows? Another archaeologist, Marie Woods, stumbled across the print while collecting shellfish on the shore. She said she couldn't believe what she was looking at. I mean, who would expect to find a giant dinosaur print while picking up some clams? It's lucky that Ms. Woods and Rob Taylor, a local fossil collector, rescued the fragile print from the shoreline. Experts warned that it was at risk of being lost to erosion or landslides. Now, plans are in motion for the footprint to go on public display at the Rotunda Museum in Scarborough. But there's some more dino-mite news. Several drought conditions in Texas have revealed ancient dinosaur footprints that are over 100 million years old. Multiple dinosaur tracks belong to the dinos were recently discovered at Dinosaur Valley State Park in northwest Texas. The droughts have caused a river running through central Texas to dry up almost entirely, which is how these prehistoric prints were finally uncovered. This guy was a real beast, measuring 15 feet and weighing in at 7 tons. It used to roam the area over 113 million years ago, according to the state park. About 60 prints from this dino have been revealed due to the drought, with an estimated 140 tracks from the dinosaur in total. But that's not all. Prints from Sauroposeidon were also discovered. This creature was a massive 66 feet long and weighed about 48 tons when fully matured. Experts believe that the Acrocanthosaurus preyed on Sauroposeidon, which explains why their prints were found together. There's a weird thing though. Sauroposeidon was bigger than Acrocanthosaurus. Can any professors please explain to me why the smaller dude would munch on the bigger one? In July 1990, 4 Czech guys decided to go on an adventure to find the Mongolian death worm, a creature that might have inspired the monster you've seen in the movie Doom. They say it lives somewhere deep in the Gobi Desert, so they flew to Mongolia, hopped into an ATV, and hired some local guides to help them. All that to meet a creature that is up to 6 feet long, can spit acid that could melt anything, and is capable of shooting electricity at those it doesn't like. Legend says that these friendly guys spend most of their days hiding underneath the sandy dunes, but they'd like to come out during the wetter months of June and July. So the timing for a spotting was simply perfect. But the crew needed to figure out how to lure the creature. Sadly for them, no one knew what the giant worm liked to eat. So they built a thumper, which is a machine that made rhythmic pounding noises. They were hoping it would call the worm out of the ground. For 2 months, they searched the vast desert, crossing dunes and rocky plains, looking for any sign of the creature. But alas, it didn't really work out. Ivan McCurley, who was the leader of the 1990 expedition, came back to Gobi Desert again. He once tried to attract the megaworm with blasts, and the second time he used a small airplane to scout the dunes. Over the years, groups from America, Britain, and New Zealand organized big expeditions to the Gobi Desert to try and find the creature. Many others came from all around the world on their own and found nothing. The people in the West first found out about the megaworm of the Gobi Desert thanks to an American paleontologist, Roy Chapman Andrews. This brave man was probably the inspiration for Indiana Jones. In 1926, he wrote about the creature in his book. At a meeting with Mongolian leaders, Andrews heard detailed descriptions of the creature, even though none of them had ever seen it themselves. One of them described it as looking like a sausage, about 2 feet long, with no head or legs. According to him, the worm was so venomous that just touching it could instantly take your life, and it lived in the loneliest parts of the Gobi Desert. Andrews didn't think the creature was real. but he shared these stories again in another book. In May 2005, 4 friends from Great Britain who search for monsters professionally decided to try their luck. They made drawings of the worm and hired local people to hand out flyers all over the Gobi Desert. These flyers offered a reward to anyone who could give information about the worm or even bring them a specimen. They thought loud sounds that other explorers tried would scare the beast away. Some told them it likes damp conditions, so they came up with a plan to block streams of water to create wet areas that would lure the worm out. Their plan didn't work because it was too hard to build dams in the desert. They ended up using small traps, but didn't find any actual proof that the worm existed. But they did meet locals who shared interesting stories about strange creatures they had seen over 70 years. Over the years, stories of the monster spread around the world. In some of them, it's only 1 foot long. In others, it's as large as a human. It's white-gray or scaly and brown, or maybe fleshy and bright red. Someone said it resembled a snake, or maybe a caterpillar, or maybe it has wings and can fly. And some believe it could be a supernatural evil being without a body. Maybe the stories are so different, and the search operations are so fruitless, because the creature doesn't even exist. Or it could be one of many cryptids. Those creatures like Bigfoot, Yeti, the Loch Ness Monster, their existence has yet to be proven. In 1983, one scientist who was visiting the region heard that an old man had managed to catch the mysterious worm. He also learned there was a nest nearby. The scientist bravely approached the hole in the sand and put his hand inside. A giant creature dragged him in, and he was never seen again. Just kidding. He actually found a Tartar sand boa inside. It's a chunky, burrowing, non-venomous snake that has small eyes and gray-brown scales. He showed it to the locals to verify if it was the monster, and supposedly all of them said yes. Most Mongolians who know about the worm still believe it's real. Now, even though people call our supposed monster a worm, it's just what it sounds like in the English translation. Many Mongol cultures have used this word for centuries to refer to any animals they thought to be really dangerous, especially snakes, even non-venomous ones. So, it doesn't have to be a literal worm after all. Worms are soft and squishy, but a creature living in the harsh Gobi Desert would need to be tougher, more like a snake or a type of lizard without legs. Neither of these creatures can shoot electricity or spit acid like they say the death worm does. But some snakes, like cobras, can spit venom that's dangerous for people. If it were real, the creature would have a backbone, and explorers searching for it would likely find some bones or evidence left behind. And there are actually fossil remains all over the Gobi Desert. Scientists found representatives of over 80 dino groups here over the last almost 100 years. It all started with the world's first dinosaur egg nests. This discovery changed all the scientists knew about dinos. It was the first proof they laid eggs. In the following 2 years, the same expedition team unearthed over 100 dinosaurs and took them to the American Museum of Natural History, where you can still see them today. Some of them were swimming around in the Cretaceous Sea that used to be here about 71 million years ago. They resembled modern birds. The mystery of the megaworm is still unsolved, but there used to be another mystery scientists finally managed to explain. Back in the 13th century, a famous traveler, Marco Polo, not the guy from the swimming pool game, crossed the Gobi Desert. He thought he could hear mysterious noises, like the sounds of musical instruments such as drums. He wrote about it in his book and believed he might be hearing the voices of restless spirits. Scientists call these noises singing sands or booming sands. Unlike the squeaky sound you might hear when walking on a sandy beach, these desert sounds are much louder, like a musical instrument playing deep, haunting notes. Over the years, people came up with all kinds of ideas about what caused the sounds, like underground water or winds making the sand vibrate. Not all dunes can do this, and scientists wanted to figure out why. Sometimes the winds might cause a small avalanche on the side of a dune, and then you can hear the magical sound start. But this is rare. So, to study it, scientists had to help the dunes sing. They climbed to the top of a dune and slid down on their backs, using their hands and feet to push sand down. As the sand tumbled, the sound started softly and got louder. They could even feel the vibrations with their hands. So they found out that for a dune to sing, a few special things need to happen. The grains of sand must be the right shape. The dune has to be big, and the sand must be very dry, so no singing after it rains. Inside the dune, there's a hard layer of packed sand that acts like a giant speaker. This layer bounces the sound waves back and forth, makes the noise louder and louder, and creates a haunting melody that can fill the desert air. In other words, the dunes can play tunes. Yeah, sorry, I couldn't help myself with that one.
Imagine you've booked a tour through the jungles of Costa Rica. All of a sudden, you stumble upon a huge stone sphere, nearly the length of a king-sized bed in diameter. How on earth did it end up there? And what does it symbolize? You immediately ask your guide. He's not as amazed as you are, and tells you that there are actually several hundreds of them scattered across the south of the country. The mysterious stone spheres don't have an official name. The locals simply call them las bolas, which means balls in Spanish, while historians refer to them as diquis spheres, after the culture that produced them. Scientists have studied the sediment layers of the earth around them and estimate that the earliest were made around the year 600 CE, and the newest ones date to the year 1000 CE. Many of the spheres were relocated after their initial discovery, and that's why archaeologists can't date them precisely. The diquis culture completely disappeared shortly after they were discovered by the Spanish in the 16th century. Unlike the Mayas and the Aztecs, the myths or legends of these peoples didn't survive, so they cannot explain the existence of the mysterious orbs. More than 300 of these objects have been discovered so far, with some being smaller than 1 inch in diameter, and the largest measures 6.6 feet in diameter, standing taller than most humans. Although there are ones made from limestone, most spheres were carved out of a coarse version of basalt, a type of rock that forms when lava cools rapidly. Some orbs weigh up to 15 tons, and in most cases, their surface is smooth to the touch, although there are coarse, mostly unfinished pieces. If we throw away the theory that river erosion naturally sculpted the spheres, the ancient people seem to have created them by hammering boulders with other rocks. Once they got the rough shape they were aiming for, they would polish the rock to perfection, using techniques such as controlled fracture and grinding. The mysterious spheres are located in the Diquis Delta, on the coast of the Pacific Ocean. Most of them can be found in a place called Farm 6, which, alongside 3 other sites, was proclaimed a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2014. The area contains other finds from the pre-Columbian era, such as paved areas, burial sites, and mounds. For centuries, the stone balls were hidden under a thick layer of sediment that protected them against the elements and looters, until they were unearthed during the 1930s. The company that owned the land was clearing the rainforest for banana plantations when they stumbled upon these unusual stone constructions. Some were damaged by bulldozers, and some by workers trying to pry them open, as they believed there was gold hidden inside. It took a while before the authorities intervened to stop further damage to the finds. Doris Stone, the daughter of an executive of the company that owned the land, was the first to study the spheres. In 1943, she published an article in a leading American archaeological journal, turning the world's attention to the orbs. Expeditions soon followed, and archaeologists were immediately able to determine that the stone formations were human-made, probably created by the ancient indigenous population of Costa Rica. To this day, no one has been able to fully explain their function in a scientific way. It means there's still room for some wild theories about the sphere's origins and true purpose. The most popular theory in the scientific community is that the stone spheres served as decorations and status symbols, as many of them were found near the houses of chieftains. Local tribal leaders were also laid to rest with some of the smaller balls, so these stone formations were definitely associated with power in some way. Chiseling a boulder to perfection involved a lot of labor and planning, and only powerful individuals could afford it at the time. The other popular theory is that the boulders were used for astronomical observations. Individual spheres represented stars or planets, like a primitive map of the night sky. Since they were perfectly round, it was easy to roll them around. Before the jungle engulfed them, the area where they were found was a flat alluvial plain, ideal for rolling large boulders around. Another version of this theory suggests that the stones were used as boundary markers, much like modern border stones, which are also mostly made from stone. Finally, legends from other tribes that lived in the area tell of how the spheres were cannonballs that the deity of thunder used to drive away the deity of winds and hurricanes. We still don't know the original purpose of the Costa Rican spheres, but they remain an important part of the country's national identity. The National Museum in the Costa Rican capital, San Jose, has 6 of them in its courtyard. Many other spheres have become prized garden decorations for wealthy Costa Ricans. There's even one at Harvard University. More than a millennium after they were created, the mysterious stone spheres of Costa Rica are still associated with power and wealth. In terms of numbers, the stone orbs are not perfectly round. They are rated as nearly perfect, at 96% spherical in shape. And while even that is pretty impressive, the spheres of Costa Rica are not the only ones of their kind. Nearly a decade ago, workers came across mysterious giant stone spheres deep underground in a coal mine in northern Asia. The surface of the spheres, which measured a little over the length of a human footstep in diameter, was unusually smooth, and people tried to explain it somehow. Some were certain they were out of this world, and others suggested the spheres were actually petrified dinosaur eggs. Scientists quickly put an end to further discussion, as it turned out that the mysterious spheres were concretions. Those are rock formations that take millions of years to form deep underground. Think of a pebble that picks up snow as it rolls down a hill. That's how concretions are made. Groundwater, rich in sediment and minerals, flows around the sediment, slowly shaping it into a perfect orb. The process is quite common in nature, but most concretions are fairly small. The spheres found in the coal mine grew to their size in the mineral-rich ground, and they were big enough to get the press and the general public interested. Another possible case of concretions is the massive stone spheres found in the Visoko Valley in Bosnia. Samir Osmanagic, better known as the Bosnian Indiana Jones, was the first to explore those objects about as wide as the length of a London bus. He believes the stone spheres were carved by a lost civilization that lived in the area 1,000 years ago. The reddish color of the orbs, though, is proof to geologists that they are indeed concretions, rich in iron content. The Moki marbles, found in rural Utah, are similar in color to the Bosnian spheres. These tiny concretions are the size of toy marbles and consist of a sandstone core and a shell made out of hematite, an iron ore. In South Africa, miners have come across Klerksdorp spheres, which are similar in shape and size to Moki marbles. The only difference is that these ones formed inside volcanic sediments and ash. The most intriguing among human-made tiny spheres are probably the orbs found on several Greek islands. Scientists discovered 700 stones smaller than golf balls near the Bronze Age site of Akrotiri on the island of Santorini. They believe that the finds were between 3,600 and 4,500 years old. When they compared all the stones' variations in size and color, the archaeologists concluded that these enigmatic stones could have easily been the oldest board game ever made. With the help of artificial intelligence, scientists are now trying to work out the rules of this game.
Ever wondered what Earth would look like if it was split evenly between land and water? I mean like 50% land and 50% ocean. Like a cosmic pizza with just 2 toppings split equally. First things first, we all know that water is essential for life. That's why scientists search for water on other planets to find potential life. On our own planet, water covers about 71% of its surface, with most of it found in the oceans. What if we took away almost a quarter of that water and replaced it with land? If we did balance out the land-to-water ratio, we would see some pretty drastic changes. Due to the sea level drop, regions around the North and South Poles would dry up completely. Meanwhile, every continent on the planet would expand to reveal an enormous amount of new territory. This would be equivalent to the current surface areas of Asia, Europe, Africa, and North America combined. Imagine all those new vacation spots you could explore with all that land. This shift in the ratio of land and water wouldn't be all sunshine and rainbows though. With much less water covering the surface, our ocean currents would get messed up, leading to a destabilized climate. This would mean colder temperatures around the poles and even hotter temperatures in the already scorching equatorial regions. Rain levels would drop, creating dangerous droughts and new deserts in many inland areas. Let's not forget about the creatures living on Earth. Plants, animals, and humans would all need to adapt to being less dependent on water. Some animals may even evolve to be smaller or switch to a strictly carnivorous diet due to water scarcity. And sadly, lots of life forms in our current oceans would struggle to survive, which would be a huge bummer for all the fish lovers out there. Let's try to imagine a totally different scenario for our planet next. Back in 1884, the press reported on an astronomer who claimed to have discovered a cubic planet beyond Neptune. We've sure come a long way since then. We've come to know that in our universe, there's no possibility of planets being square, at least based on the information we have today. Let's travel back in time to 4.5 billion years ago when our own planet was just a hot mess of gas and dust. As this chaotic cloud collapsed, a hot star formed and began to attract all nearby matter with its gravitational pull. Eventually, a rotating disk formed around the star, and collisions between particles led to the formation of massive bodies, planets. And because gravity pulls equally from all sides towards the center, planets naturally take a spherical shape. But what if we spice things up and skew the distribution of gravity? Well, if you're feeling adventurous and want to live life on the edge, then welcome to the cube Earth. Yay! We'd have 6 sides now, but don't get too excited. None of them would be any fun. You'd constantly feel like you're climbing up a steep hill, no matter where you go. That's because gravity is strongest at the center of each face. So the further away you were from the center, the stronger pull you'd feel. Say goodbye to taking standing tall for granted. If you found yourself on the edges of the cube Earth, you'd find no lush and vibrant landscapes. All the water would pool at the center of each face, leaving the edges rocky and barren. And forget about breathing easily. The atmosphere along the edges and corners would be too thin or non-existent to support life. But we'll come back to that later. The climate on the cube Earth would depend on how it would rotate. If it spun on an axis through 2 faces, then the climate would be similar to what we have on Earth now, but more extreme. The top and bottom faces would be polar, while the other 4 would enjoy an equatorial climate. However, if the cube Earth rotated through its corners, each side would have a climate with more moderate temperatures and precipitation. Say goodbye to extreme weather, but also wave goodbye to your equatorial paradise. On the bright side, you would probably be able to walk into outer space. Since the atmosphere is held down by gravity, and gravity would now be pulling towards the center of each face, the atmosphere would be thicker there and thinner towards the edges. If the cubic Earth had the same volume as our round world today, its sharp corners would poke out beyond our atmosphere, creating unprotected and uninhabitable areas. But who says you wouldn't be able to rent a spacesuit and stand on top of the world and outside of it at the same time? Talk about taking your vacation to new heights. How about if our planet was completely covered with water? Well, it turns out that ancient Earth might have been just that, a water world. According to some researchers, our planet was mostly covered with oceans about 3 billion years ago, with only a few scattered islands popping up here and there. The scientists who made this discovery have been studying rock samples found in Western Australia. By analyzing these rocks, they were able to determine that they formed in a hydrothermal vent system on the seafloor over 3 billion years ago. This information could have some major implications for how we understand the origin and evolution of life. See, scientists still have a lot of questions about where Earth's water came from and when it appeared. But by studying these ancient rocks, they're hoping to get some answers. One way they're doing this is by looking at the oxygen found in the rocks. You see, water with different values of oxygen can tell us a lot about the environment in which it formed. And the researchers found that the rocks from 3 billion years ago had heavier oxygen content than we see in our modern oceans. This suggests that at that time, dry land hadn't emerged yet, which means that Earth was mostly covered in water. Now, this might not seem like a big deal, but it could actually help us understand how life first formed on Earth. If our planet was completely covered with water when the first single-celled organism emerged, then they probably didn't form on land. And if that's the case, it could mean that other water-covered planets might be ideal places to search for life. Our planet may never be fully covered in water ever again, but we might end up losing some, if not all, of our planet's hydration. Here's the deal. The sun is going to get hotter over the next few 100 million years. This isn't anything to do with humans and our shenanigans. It's just a natural thing that happens with all stars. The bad news is that the sun gets hotter, our planet is going to heat up too. And if things get really toasty, we're going to start losing our oceans to evaporation. Sure, we've got plenty of time to hit the beach before that happens. Experts have been working hard on a super fancy computer model to predict exactly when all this is gonna go down. And according to them, we've got around 1 billion years until things get seriously steamy. You might be wondering how they came up with that number. It turns out that when the sun gets hotter, it makes the atmosphere warmer too. And as the atmosphere warms up, more and more water evaporates from the oceans. There's a catch though. Water vapor is actually a greenhouse gas, which means it traps heat and makes things even hotter down there on the surface. As we lose more and more water, we're going to end up in a loop where the planet just keeps getting hotter and hotter until there's no water left at all. But hey, it's not all about us. This research could actually help us find other planets with liquid water. By figuring out what kinds of conditions are needed to keep water on a planet, we might be able to identify some other hospitable worlds out there. And who knows, maybe in 1 billion years, we'll have colonized one of those planets.
Recently, scientists made an astonishing discovery that might solve Stonehenge's mystery. They found something hidden deep within the DNA of Stonehenge's sarsen rocks, the huge monolithic ones, and it might reveal why our Neolithic ancestors designed and built this thing in the first place. Over the years, scientists have been scratching their heads, trying to figure out where the huge sarsen rocks came from. For years, they believed they came from a quarry just 15 miles away from the site, known as Marlborough Downs. At this site, they found similar minerals to the ones that make up the sarsen rocks. But it turned out there was more to this story than they thought. The understanding of how Stonehenge was built is always changing. Scientists need to really travel back in time to uncover its mysteries. Where did the rocks come from? How were they carried? Why was the site built? You see, the Stonehenge site, located at Salisbury Plain in England, is made up of two main types of stone. There are the super heavy sarsens and the lighter and smaller bluestones. The sarsens each weigh about 25 tons. That's as much as 3 African elephants stacked together. The heaviest sarsen stone, called the heel stone, weighs 30 tons all by itself. Together, the sarsens make that iconic outer ring circle. Inside that circle, that's where you'll find the bluestones. The naming might seem a bit misleading since they're not really blue. They have a bluish tinge to them when they are freshly broken, hence the name. These smaller rocks probably came from the Preseli Hills in southwest Wales, which is about 150 miles away from Stonehenge. They're a bit lighter than the sarsens, but still pretty heavy. The altar stone, which is classified as a bluestone, is the heaviest one, weighing around 6 tons. Its original location still isn't known for sure. To figure out where a rock came from, scientists first have to study their composition. This is like checking the rock's DNA. Then they cross-reference the structure of the rock with minerals in the soil to see if it's a match. Most of the sarsens we see around southern England are actually made of a type of sandstone known as silcrete. Think of silcrete as sand that's been hardened by underground water processes over millions of years. This process mostly happened during a period called the Paleogene, about 65 to 23 million years ago. These sarsen rocks didn't form in one big slab, but in patches, like nature leaving little rock gardens all over the place. Scientists reason the sarsens spread out randomly, forming in isolated pockets. Over time, many were buried under layers of clay and chalk, which helped preserve them. When ancient builders were on the lookout for materials, these sarsens must have looked perfect for something impressive like Stonehenge. Actually, sarsens have been used in everything, from Roman villas to medieval churches, and even in things like road curbs and old field walls. One could say these rocks were the it material for ancient builders, and continue to be popular even into more modern times. This fact made scientists start wondering that maybe not all sarsen stones that were used to build Stonehenge came from the same place. They've identified sarsen sites all over the UK, in places such as Oxfordshire and Kent. After hundreds of years of studying the sarsens, geologists finally had the right type of technology to determine the origin of the stones. Now, I wish I could tell you that it was some undisclosed location very far away from the site. But, as it turned out, the sarsens were originally from Westwoods, the forest near Stonehenge. A new factor came into play when excavations uncovered empty stone holes, showing that at least 6 bluestone pillars were removed from a Preseli Hills site called Wan Main in prehistory. They had a stone circle over there, and it's believed that some of Stonehenge's rocks were recycled rocks from this more ancient circle. If this is true, it might be that Stonehenge is part of a much larger landscape of ancient sites. If this is the case, then Stonehenge is just the cherry on top of a much larger scale project. Think of it as the sacred centerpiece of an entire landscape of monuments, mounds, stone circles, and things. This is why scientists want to find out where the rocks came from so badly. It could lead to why and how Stonehenge was built. Now, Stonehenge didn't just pop up overnight. It was built in several stages over hundreds of years. It's likely that it wasn't a single unified vision, but more like a big community project that evolved over time. With each generation, the builders brought in their own ideas, creating a stone structure that would last for ages. The first stage was around 3100 BCE. That's when people dug out a circular ditch and likely set up some bluestones as sort of a starter ring. Later, they added the sarsens and even topped some of them with horizontal stones to form those famous arches you see today, also known as the trilithons. These ancient builders had some challenges on their hands. How would they move the rocks? There's an old theory known as the ice road that suggests that the rocks were moved by natural icy pathways that formed during the winter. This way, they could slide the rocks down all the way to Stonehenge. But hey, if we're talking about a distance of over 100 miles, that's not too realistic. Anyways, this theory was debunked because it was warmer back then than it is today. There's also the river theory, which suggests that the rocks were floated along the river from the quarry to the site. But if we're talking about sarsen rocks, they're too heavy to float. So there goes that theory. What we're saying is, no one knows how the rocks were moved. Another interesting science tidbit came from all the research done in Stonehenge. A recent laser survey of the stones revealed the different stone working methods used, and has shown that some of the parts of the monument were more carefully finished than others. In particular, the northeast side and the inner faces of the central trilithons were finely dressed. FYI, a trilithon is one of Stonehenge's most famous shapes. It's when two huge monoliths receive a third one on top of them, connecting the two together. This fancy word is simply Greek for having three stones. But anyways, the bigger question, and the reason Stonehenge is so famous, is why it was built in the first place. Theories are all over the place, and some sound like they're straight out of a sci-fi show. So here's a rundown of the most popular ideas. There's, of course, the solar calendar theory. This one supposes that the stones are aligned with the movements of the sun, especially during the summer and winter solstices. During the summer solstice, the sun rises to the left of the heel stone, that's the lone stone outside the main circle, lighting up the entire monument. Some say it's the ancient version of a calendar, marking the year's longest and shortest days. Some archaeologists think Stonehenge might have been an ancient healing center. Pieces of bluestone have been found chipped away, possibly by people who believed they had healing powers. The theory goes that people traveled from all over to come to Stonehenge in hopes of a cure for whatever was ailing them. There's also some speculation that Stonehenge was the place to be. Think of it as an ancient gathering spot. Some evidence suggests that communities from distant areas traveled to Stonehenge for gatherings, feasts, and ceremonies. Studies of bones found near the site show they came from all over Britain, making it a sort of prehistoric meetup location.